Alrighty, let's get this party started today. Oh my goodness, Otto, what are you doing, cat? You're howling like a dog. Why? What is going on? VIX. What's going on with the VIX? Oh, it's gonna come back down. Yep. That means the market may indeed pop. I like that chart. It does look distributive. It's interesting. Back down to like 9 or 8. Good morning. 7 of you that are out there, you win a prize. My unending affection. I don't know. Something like that. Oh man, kind of a messy morning. It's a bit of a mixed market this morning. So we had a big rally yesterday, lots of green, as far as I could tell. And this morning we kind of went to a pop and drop state for some stocks. Others have held their little run up a little better. AMC did also drop and then ran back up. It looks like it looks to me like a back test. What is it? My appreciation. I should give you guys prizes sometime. That'd be fun. How do you do that? I don't know. Figure it out. It's probably through that membership thing. I gotta figure that thing out better. It's sort of like started it and not really been able to find a good way to use it yet. But right. Yeah, I think this is a very good defining moment right here, because this is going to be either a cat ear or a back test in a rally. And it looks more like a weakness because of how low it's come 3 times in a row. So, not to be the negative guy again, we're just going to keep popping this line. Why? We're not hitting it. But yesterday, I was trying to caution everybody that, you know, AMC is a weird one. It does sometimes have big rallies in the middle of a drop. I just felt like it would be wise to just be careful and wait until there's more confirmation. We did not push resistance here, and that is a big deal. So just like when we were up top, you know, you want to see that resistance push. Maybe it happens today. Get above 365 here. Maybe. This is disconcerting. This is just one of those things that, again, you're sort of watching and you got to be careful, because sometimes that initial move looks really promising and then they rug pull. I'm trying to get this line right. It's not quite where I want it. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's close enough. So what looks like to me is that this is backing up. Now, a bear flag is fine, which is a possibility. Do we get a lot of bear flags on AMC? I'm going to say no, we don't. But, you know, this is pretty standard stuff. I'm going to turn off this alarm because it keeps popping off for some reason. It's pretty standard stuff, though, in the market. If it can back up here and hold, it should be okay. There's a trajectory out here that was really kind of neatly associated with the bottom, which is great. because we took that trajectory from the drop down here, applied it outward, and it looks good. So I'm happy that the bottom is like that. Maybe what happens here, big maybe, is we catch that and we reverse. So when I guess when the week started, I said that I thought that there would be possibility we get like a rebound. We may not quite get the gap. We may rebound, and we'll see what happens Thursday to Friday. So this is Thursday to Friday. Yeah, good morning. This is Thursday to Friday. We're in a situation now where we're underneath 350 on AMC. We've pushed it, which is good. That is important. It's not, the only resistance is not at 365. So I was saying like we didn't push resistance at 365, which is true. But there's also the more long-term support and resistance mark, which is basically right at 350. It's like, it is a bit debatable because so a lot of times what I hear from people, and I'm just going to maybe throw this out there real quick. I've heard this a few times, is that I pick these weird numbers and then folks are like, well, that's not really it. It's just 4 or it's just 3 or it's just whatever. So I think that comes from like a desire to kind of just have round numbers, and like you're probably right to some degree that like the market is trying to gravitate around 5, and we keep seeing 505 or 504 or something like that. I just try to be as precise as possible. So when I look back at this, it doesn't look like 350 to me. It looks like something up here around 357. And I don't know exactly why it is there, but it's just not at 350 for me, because I'm like, well, this was the back test, and yeah, there's obviously like something built out down here around 340, 350. It's really like around maybe 340, I would suggest. Just walks down underneath it. So I don't really care if you guys like, if you're thinking about 350 and you're thinking, well, it should be 350, not 357 or something. That's fine. Like, you trade the levels that you think are correct. I'm just saying that I think it's a little bit higher, and I think that that 365 that we saw, you can see right there, it's right on this ledge as well. So the 365 may be more important than 350 in the end, because we did find a support here and a resistance here. You can see right there that little wraparound that happened. That's a wrap around 365, not 350. So is 350 important? Sure. I mean, I'm positive it's important, but I think that 365 might be a better short-term signal for the break, even though yesterday, yeah, we broke out of the trend. So I'm not trying to like backstep. I'm just saying, giving you some more information on the what I think about what's going on with AMC right this second. So is it bad? No, it's fine. At least for now, it broke out. If it can hold the breakout, and it's trying to, we may get another leg up here. There's plenty of room. Even like on the 15-minute, there's plenty of space to get overbought. There's plenty of space. So there's no worry in that regard. I did have some reservation earlier in the week, and I said that it might pop and then drop back down again going into Friday. Still possible. So what I'm suggesting to you is that this is more or less either going to be a cat ear or a continuation at this point, because this is the middle of a wave. We know that that's what typically happens. My biggest concern right this moment is this really deep backup this morning. Just a lot of selling, still. And this is not what you want to see. I know we were arguing yesterday because, we had a lot of people in here really bullish, and that's great. I'm not against being bullish. It's it's perfectly normal, like, to be bullish if you think the stock price is going to go up. And I'm not against that, but I was trying to play kind of devil's advocate, and we had a lot of folks that were saying this could be like a terminal spring, basically, and I was arguing that I didn't necessarily think that was the case. It might be, but it has to prove itself by coming up pretty far, like all the way back to 406. fortunately, there's a decent chance that there is a target there, and the trajectory would suggest that you could get there by almost by the end of the week, maybe, if it can hold. But the other thing that kind of presented itself to me was that this is not even yet out of its channel. So there's another wider channel that hasn't broken yet, and that's up here around, again, 365. So this little pocket may end up being pretty significant if we do advance right here. It's going to be like a confirmation zone. And if it doesn't get over this in the next day or two, well, obviously we're going to wait till Tuesday to find out what happens next. But I would suggest that there's no, maybe even today, because I'm not sure. This goes through Thursday into Friday. Yeah, I think at best you could chop sideways all day at like 350. But then you're kind of sitting there wondering what's going to happen on the max pain day. Are we really going to break out and run? I don't know. You know, so this to me is like a, I wouldn't say a danger zone, but maybe like sort of like that, like a potential place to turn. And then I'm not going to hold back my reservations about this creek. I still think that we haven't necessarily hit the creek yet. So the creek is low. It's lower than where we are, and we didn't get there. And say whatever you want about creeks. We know that historically, sometimes those creeks, like this one did hit, but historically, sometimes those creeks don't get met if the stock is going to move. So I will concede that, but I don't think it got low enough, you know, and I'm just going to leave it at that. Like, I don't think it got low enough. We'll see, right? If that's sufficient, that's sufficient. It's possible that that was hit. You're the one who has argued to yourself all the time. Yeah. I find it to be helpful because it helps me to parse through bias. Because a lot of times, for me anyways, if I have an initial thought, that tends to rule and be like dominant. And you get stuck with this idea in your head that it has to be a certain way, and then you don't see the obvious, like, oh, it's not going that way kind of thing. Like AMD is an example of that right now. Like it had that pop, it almost made it. It hit 121, but on the open, it dropped like right down. There was zero opportunity to exit this play, and now we're back down to 118. And this is a good example of one that, like, I'm pretty bullish on it on the whole. I still think there's a good chance that it's going to go up and make this kind of move. But given everything that we do know, is it possible that I was wrong about my initial assessment that it just comes up, builds a support, and goes? Yeah, because it could come up, build a support of sort, and then dump it in order to come back down, get this gap fill, and do basically like a double bottom. And I think that there's room to do that. You know, they've created some space to do that. So MFI has been consistently down on the 4 hour, and I was talking about how there's a bullish divergence on a pretty strong one on the 4 hour for RSI, but MFI did not follow through with that. On the daily, it was different. So like this is why I want to argue with myself, because if it's not what you think it was going to be, what's the alternative, right? And you need to be able to sort of like debate your own point. I think as a trader, you kind of have to do that. I don't say you have to be a crazy person like me, but you have to be able to play your own devil's advocate, because at the end of the day, like, trading is a solitary job. It's a solitary task. You know, you can take advice, you can look at data, you can see what else people are doing, you can subscribe to services, this and that and the other. You can have a community even, but at the end of the day, like, the trade is yours and yours alone. So it is a solitary job, you know, to trade. So I'm like, I look at this kind of stuff and I'm like, well, if I don't argue against my own ideas, and I don't know if it's like who's going to do it, you know? It's like I have to be willing to take a stance against my own ideas. So, yeah. So this still looks moderately bullish on the daily. Like it's still divergent here. I would say MFI looks like it's in a pinch point, which could be a bit of a negative because sometimes these, as you guys know, these pinch points can actually be like a compression that then drops. Like as in, you know, we talk about the cat ear structure. That's often like in a pinch point. It usually looks like a wedge or something. That narrowing of the range tends to be a sign of possible divergence, one way or the other, where you're going to make a move bigger up or down. And so that could be the case here with, with AMD. And I don't have a lot of good things to say about these type of patterns where you have an arc like that, a curve. I really don't feel like most of the time that's beneficial. Not as familiar with AMD anyways, so maybe there's situations here where this is kind of like a curve. It does have a nice hard bottom there, but it's a curve, so this one did kind of follow through with that move. That drop kind of nasty. I would say it's similar to this. Maybe we just need to chop for a bit. I don't know. There's some differences. Like this laid up on top of the moving average. This is sort of chilling out right around it. Hasn't yet made that breach. MFI here had already kind of broken out and come over top. I mean, arguably, if you draw the line down here, you could say that it did that already. It kind of already jumped over. I'm just using the outermost creek. Yeah, so a bit ugly this morning on AMD. Also, NU looked bad. Looked not good at all. So huge bearish engulfing, at least for now, on the 4 hour. I'm not convinced it's done. Again, this didn't get overbought on the 4 hour. But it's already showed more weakness, I guess, in terms of like getting up here. Like when I look at previous examples of these runs, aside from the occasional blip through, most of them hold pretty strong. Like this is a really strong trend. These guys are holding above, you can see they're holding above the moving average, like the entirety of the trend. So we're in a position right now that looks a bit different. Like we're not doing that. This is the only one back here in the last, year or whatever that did dip through. Similar area too. It dipped really low before it took off. This is just different. It's like rounding off. Doesn't look quite as strong. So yeah, it's a bit disappointing. Here's another one, I guess, that did chop quite a bit. This was a while back. This is August 2023. This is at the beginning of like the breakover, pretty major area. Going back into the upper range. Yeah, but then again, like it doesn't actually break the creek till way later. It's already like overbought. And then it just continues to stay overbought, essentially upper 50% here. So, I don't know, it's debatable. It still moved from bottom to top, but this is a very slow, a lot of lower volume in there as well. So, yeah. So I guess my concern here would be we may be setting up for like a bigger double bottom or something in the end. Like I'm still convinced that this is likely going to come down to 855. If it doesn't, then it has to break out of this trend, and we would know it's not going to be hidden. Obviously, you'll know when if it breaks out there. So that hasn't been confirmed, so there's no reason to like speculate too much about it just yet. We haven't even gotten to the outer part of the trend. And a lot of this was us just thinking that we're going to go up and hit that trend. I said yesterday it might be good to kind of redo this. Yeah, there's a gap at 272. Yep, maize and blue, there's a gap down there. You're not losing your mind. Yep. It might be a good idea for us to kind of redo this chart to some degree, clean it up a little bit, because it's getting kind of ugly. You can see it's just flushing now. Yesterday, I expressed concern because we had some divergence on the 15-minute time frame up top here. There was definitely some things that weren't quite going right, and this has been consistently divergent. It's interesting because when we talked about this yesterday, MFI represents volume inputted into the RSI formula. It's weighted. It's a volume-weighted RSI, basically. And you would not think there's anything wrong necessarily just looking at this RSI by itself. MFI, though, it doesn't agree. It's going the opposite way. It looks weak all the way through here, and that's because the volume is dropping as it's going up. So this kind of turned into like a bad play almost overnight. We had ideas yesterday that it might be a little bit bearish because they created a bit of a bearish top here. Not like extreme, but enough that it was like concerning, because it's like, well, it's a little divergent going up here. There was a narrowing as well. You can see that narrowing. It seems kind of obvious now that that was a bit more of like a wedging action here. And so kind of a mess, right? So this is a bad trade. I think that on the whole, even if it does go back up to the top, the incredible amount of chop here has made it basically impossible to win unless you're doing like really quick, like in out kind of moves. The only profit that I made on this was when it dropped down and I got a bit of profit on a put play because I had bought some puts. And that's it. I mean, my contracts are basically like zeroed out. I mean, they're not, I didn't put a ton of money into this. That's not what I did, but certainly not the strongest, right? So when I look at this, I'm like thinking to myself that the, ow. Jeez, cat. When I'm looking at this, I'm thinking to myself that, though I don't think it's necessarily like dead, it certainly doesn't look great. It looks like this is about as far as it was pushed for the purpose of distributing and selling. You see it's made a lower low right here. So at this point, not my favorite setup. Definitely not my favorite. So that's weird. Is something going on with the stream? Are you guys able to hear me and everything? Or did we legitimately just go from like 45 people to 13 people? Okay. All right. Man, oh man. Yeah, I don't know, dude. I gotta be honest. I gotta figure out what we're gonna do with this stream setup, because I don't know. I'll just make a decision at some point, I guess. It's dying, Booksy. Oh well. You know, I don't used to not really concern myself at all with how many people were on here, but it's been really bad this year. Like the viewership is dumped like to the pits. Probably because AMC dumped to the pits. And because I'm not focusing on AMC and GME all the time. But that's a huge drop off just because I clicked away from. Yeah. I don't know about that. I don't typically watch it, but it's next to my chat window, and like the bar just like went off a cliff basically over like 10 minutes. I was like, well, people really don't want you talking about anything but one thing. I think that's respectable though. Like I was thinking about that yesterday because I was like, am I overreacting a little bit? I think I am, because it is respectable, because there's a lot of people that rely on some people for information. They just want to kind of know what's going on. And if you become like kind of a charting news source and then you stop being a charting news source, then, well, for a particular stock or particular brand or whatever, then yeah, I think it makes sense that some people are like, yeah, it's not for me anymore. You know, I get it. I'm wondering if I should do like a second, maybe like individual videos that are just like one-off, just updates on AMC. And then that way we can focus more on just trading and stuff for these streams. All right, well, I hate to say this because I'm kind of bummed out by the whole move here. I don't think it was what I wanted it to be. Close at 121.84. Closed high. It came to the bottom of the bar, but it hit the little upper creek here. So AMD, again, same thing. Hit the upper creek, came down and made a new low here, pushed beneath the floor. So unless this kind of like immediately comes back and regains some footing, I'm thinking it looks a bit weak, and it may come back down going into Friday, like down to here probably. It's sort of a bummer because, yeah, basically resets my position. And I'm talking about NU because it was one that I liked a lot, thought it was going to have a good play. There was a good play in here, but the good play was really off this bottom. And I'm not really sure if there was a better way to do this than to just look at this final break here and maybe buy in right there at like 11. And that would have been it. But even then, it's like it kept dipping back down. Very volatile, ugly play. So the shares only positioned from about $11 to about $11.50 would have been an okay trade. Anything else here just did not do well. So this is not a winner. I still like NU as a stock. I still think that it's one I'm going to watch because it tends to be very consistent, and it usually has some pretty good moves in it. It's a very bullish property. So if you're a bull and you like to trade upsides, I think NU long-term should have some pretty bullish property. The 1190 target never got met. I still think it's possible it gets met. We talked about it yesterday a little bit. This type of move, the only thing about it I guess I don't like is that this came too low. If it had stayed up a little bit higher, I might be a little bit more like whatever, who cares. This does happen, this kind of a move right here. And then it goes up and reaches towards the top again. But what, Booksy? But this came lower. Maybe that's just, again, the sign of weakness for what's going to happen later on. Because it keeps doing this where it's like pushing down. I mean, if I had to call out sign of weaknesses left and right here, I'd be like, yeah, lower low here after making a support, lower low, support, higher high, lower low. It just keeps doing it. But that could also be a result of what we talked about earlier, that on like the bigger picture, this may ultimately still need to come down towards like 9s and 8s. Yeah. Well, we'll monitor it. For now, I'm a bit unsure, but I think it looks a bit bearish to me. Like this just looks like a pretty classic like cat ear. So The only thing about this, again, that you could probably use as like a, hey, I don't want to go any further on this, is this trend here, which is essentially like a good place for a stop loss. Because if it breaks beneath this, then it's essentially done. Usually after that point, you're heading back down towards the next lower creek, which would probably be way down here. So this would be a big gap zone here to here, more than likely, in terms of like dropping, just straight drop. So this is the area that we're going to have some dicey stuff. Here's why I'm kind of stuck. Because it did cross up and over, I'm like a little bit stuck on whether or not this is ultimately like really bearish. I do think this looks bad here. This is a bearish divergence because this did push over that top. So technically it's bearish divergent on 15-minute on a much larger time frame. Let's check the 1 hour. Same thing here. The caveat, I suppose, on the 1 hour with the strength index is that it didn't actually on the 1 hour it didn't actually make the leg up. Like it didn't come into overbought territory, and it also didn't hit that top trend. So it looks like it's missing, to me it looks like it's missing like a leg here up. It's just not there. But if it were to capitulate right now, this would be very detrimental. So if it breaks down, it's pretty far, but if it breaks down back through like maybe the floors right here, probably the best way to just guide for guidance purposes through these, and then you're in trouble. Yeah, still not the best trade. Doesn't really matter at this point if it goes up or not. I'm not convinced I'm going to get any profit from this trade on my part. You might have done really well if you traded it better than I did. Yeah, I still do, even though I do believe in this as a move, I'm just trying to figure out where it comes from. Two hour looks about the same. It's like slightly divergent, didn't quite get overbought. 3 hour, same deal. This looks kind of whack. Really just needs to see that buy-in, like that continuation go. Yeah, we'll probably find out today, because this has got to either break to the upside as a flag would, and all that's going to be bound to like whether it holds certain levels here today. AMC's kind of the same way. It's got a similar problem actually, and maybe the rest of the market looks similar as well. Everything kind of went up. It doesn't quite look finished. So everything looks like it could have like another leg left in it, like this does certainly. Looked like it hasn't quite gotten there yet. But it made some interesting lower lows this morning. I mean, AMD did that, and it's not looking good. It looks like it's about to dump, like it's finishing its... finishing its move. Doge was kind of popping off a little last night here and there. It looked like it was trying to jump that creek, but it ultimately never did. So I waited. I was curious just to see if it would. I kept checking back, and it just never did. But it tried to in extended hours last night. There was a few moments of attempted breakout for Doge. And then XRP did trigger the 180. I haven't looked at it yet. May have gone way beyond it at this point. Who knows? The XRP was the one that I said that if it goes, it's probably this is weird. I wonder why it looks like that on this chart. Probably goes that 185 or something around there would be confirmation. So yeah, IWM was the one that yesterday I said I did not want to. So you can see it's in the little crosshairs there on Doge. IWM was the one yesterday I said did not feel comfortable trading it again because it did not manage to hold above 225, and it also didn't hold above that 4-hour 180. And it looked like that was probably the right decision. It just stayed flat this morning. It opened basically flat. It did not have any real change in the open. And then it's been kind of slumping a bit. It still looks good. I mean, when you look at the big picture, this is just the first part of a reaction. Again, I think I would say it's debatable to some degree, but I think that most of this seems to indicate to me that it's not quite done. Sort of like NU, this also has this bizarre little downturn here in volume. So it's like the market almost like pumped on principle, like it just had to pump. I know there was the CPI report, but it's almost just like a technical pump, like where there's not a lot of conviction in it just yet. Like, oh, there's a divergence here. It looks really good. We're going to pump. When it breaks out, it breaks out. You get CPI news, it pumps. But that volume is not showing a lot of conviction from the market. It's very weak. Even, I mean, if you look at where the breakout happened to start right here on the 13th, this Monday, it's just nothing but down. It's not what you want off of a bottom. You want a higher volume, like pick up off the bottom that then goes the other way. In some ways, like this is okay if this were higher volume and it dropped off, but it's really low volume and it still dropped off. This is kind of a mess. So I felt like the play was essentially over for me right here at 224. I got out of everything. I just traded, and you guys already know this, I traded here to here, and then I traded from here to here. And that was my 2 trades this week that yielded the best results. We're on the IWM ETF. How good were the results? Basically made like a 90% gain on the positions that I traded altogether, minus the losses that I haven't yet taken, which I may need to take, you know, depending on what happens here. It won't be a severe dent, but it'll be decent. So that's a good sign. AMC's trying to go again. Let's see if the volume picks up. It's dicey because it's going right back to the same level it was just at. So it needs to do something different this time. So it hit that low, reacted back to the upside. Looks a little more like a flag, which is good. We'll see if it can hold this support here at 350 this time. If it can, I do expect to go to 365, and then we'll see from there. Looking pretty fine. Nothing crazy. Could it come back down? Yes and no. Like at this point, what you don't want is you don't want like repeated upthrust through 350 that fail to hold. So at this point, you definitely don't want another lower low. If this continued to make higher highs, yeah, you could come back down. Higher lows, I mean, you could come back down to here. That wouldn't kill it. It could just be a place of, you know, buy-in again, essentially. So ACHR, please. Yeah, I'll take a look. XRP went to 194 billion. Yep. Dang, man. Yeah, that's interesting because I said like 180 something would have been a good buy-in. It hit that in after hours, and then I didn't look at it after that, but I figured it might be breaking out. So it broke out. It's just on a tear. Oh, B-hat. Yeah. It's funny. Yeah, I'm still watching Fang pretty closely. I can't imagine this continues forever, but it's like everything else that I've been talking about this morning. It looks like it has a little bit of a pop that needs to happen still. Like it's not quite there yet. After it hits like 184, I think it's going to have, I don't know, I would imagine it has a breather. That's to me where the buy-in might be. I'm really bullish on Fang. I think it's going to go really far. It's a bit of a longer term play, maybe out till April, so a couple months, but we'll see. You know, maybe this inauguration thing Monday is enough of a catalyst on the whole. I'm looking at this like it's already overextended, so I'm not really sure why it would keep going, because market's hyper bullish. It just keeps going. Yeah, that does happen, but even still, you should see some kind of relief at some point. I guess here would be an example where it just kind of chopped in overbought territory for like 2 months and just kept rising. Regardless, the breakout's really easy on Fang. It's an easy trade, and I'm not trying to be like overly bullish on it, but it is a very easy trade. Like I'm not trading off this bottom because I think we could be near a top. If it does have that pullback, I think it's a really easy trade. If it breaks out over the top, as long as it finds support, I could play that with a really tight stop. But I'm almost 100% positive that if that happens, this should be rising up towards, maybe not rally into earnings, but it'd be rising about 22%. It's a decent chance if you play your options right to make a couple 100% even. We will see. And if I don't get that pullback, then, yeah, I don't know. I feel like it needs to happen. I wish it would have happened today and tomorrow, to be honest. I think that would have been easier to read. Or whatever. MPW is down this morning, back to 403. I'm going to look at this really quick. I know it's not everybody's favorite. I'm going to take a minute just to stare at it, though, because I was curious yesterday if this floor back here is going to hold, and that is the 403. It doesn't look as strong as it did yesterday. See how it made a lower low here? It really needed to push higher and start an advancement, because this advanced, but then it fell. And now it's not advancing again. It just doesn't look very good. It needs to make a higher low and or a higher high, and it hasn't done that. So why are you still bullish on it, Booksy? Well, I won't be for long if this doesn't break out. Because what's forming right now is the quintessential cat ear. It's essentially the thing that I look for in almost every stock because it's easy to see as a bottom of a wave. This is on a falling portion, and you might say, well, it already had cat ears over here, so why are you looking for them over here? They're everywhere. It doesn't matter. This is the bottom of a wave. It's a bottom of a wave is a bottom of a wave. Like, it doesn't matter if you connect one to the other. You know, there's different ways of doing it for sure. I could connect these two, or I could come backwards and say, well, I think it's really this guy right here, because both of them are up thrusts in the midst of whatever. And they're probably both true, because a cat ear would be, what? Iterative, like that usually happens. So you usually get like both. So this is definitely potentially like an ear, and then this is like the second ear right here. So what I'd be concerned about is that this actually crosses up and over. The RSI definitely looks like it did jump over. Seems that way. So does the price action, except this bizarre like dive back through the line. Like that really just kind of ruffles my feathers, man. Just ruffles my feathers. I don't like that. I just don't like it. So I guess what I'd be looking for now is like if there's a 1, 2, 3, 4, where this is wave 1, we really need to see the next wave go up and over as well. And I don't know exactly what this is going to look like, but maybe not that long-winded, but we'll see. So this is a bothersome chart right now. It's like cannot seem to get its footing. It's really frustrating. So yeah, if this is a wave 1 out of the cat ear, then we need to see this could be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Timing on that's weird. 3, 4. But it's not really giving me the answer. It's not giving it away right yet. This is nice, this high volume bottom. We're just lacking a higher high or higher low. So, bummer. 403 would be a really nice support if it can hold like 403 or thereabouts. That could be really positive. Again, maybe this is like what we're looking at elsewhere, and we're seeing that, hey, there's this bizarre kind of bearish look to it, but maybe it's just not over yet, you know? Like this could hold support here and then pop again. That changes everything, right? If this holds here and pops again, it's like, yeah, suddenly that's not like an issue. And that's kind of what we're talking about on a lot of these is like, it just seems like there's a lack of a second move. And if it can get that second move, then like we got the first big move yesterday. If we can get that second move, maybe after some consolidation, we'd be fine. I think we'd be in good shape. Probably correct itself. So that's what I'm looking at here too. I'm like, yeah, I'm not really happy this didn't make a higher high, but maybe this isn't quite done yet. It's very possible this is just backing up, find some support, and then goes again. It's not impossible, and it would at that point it would be fine. It would be pretty healthy from a bullish perspective. So unfortunately, if it dumps down again, I'm going to have to be careful because if it starts making lower lows and it can't hold, this little signal of buy-in wouldn't really mean a whole lot, would it? You've got two heavy bottoms right here, heavy volume bottoms right here and here. So we need to capitalize on it. It is divergent, as you can tell on the 4-hour, but this is like heavily divergent on the 4-hour. This goes all the way back to, I mean, if you just look at the continuous divergence here, even if this dumped down one more time and hit like 27 on RSI, it'd still be divergent going all the way back to July. That's a lot of space to come down and still be kind of a strong divergence. So this is, I mean, you say whatever you want about this stock not performing as well, and it hasn't. It is in a pretty bullish position. Even this little tiny guy keeps trying. He's just ramping. Problem is these sell-offs are just brutal. Like, it gets sold off like it's nothing. All the way down here. Hasn't kind of made that full turn yet. Man, it does make me wonder, you know? I wonder if there's a way, beyond, like I wonder if there's a way to really figure out what a divergence should do measure-wise. Because in theory, like I know this could go up to like 550, but that's just based on like this motion and this motion. It could still just be like a shouldering that comes back down. So like in theory, like yeah, it's not necessarily going to go super low by default, though there are some really low targets. But you could have an upthrust here that fails, kind of like what happened over here above this creek, and then still comes crashing back down, so on and so forth. This is still a rally move. But I wonder how that divergence plays into it. If it's divergent from June to now, which is like 6 months, and unlike AMC, which lost its divergence, MPW did not. Looks like we're pushing to 360. Maybe trying to on AMC. I'm kind of flipping back and forth today because I want to keep my finger on the pulse and just check these guys out every now and then. And GME is just kind of sitting flat. I wonder if clean this up a bit. I wonder if that isn't more important than I'm giving it credit for. So I have a wave here that I haven't really messed with in a long time. This wave is very long term. Like, it suggests that you wouldn't come back up till 2026. This particular wave. There's another one that's much tighter that comes from July, and it obviously breaks out a lot sooner, going into the end of this year. And then there's even tighter waves technically. But I wonder if I'm not giving it enough credibility, because this is a place that when we came to the upside, this was a place that we had stopped and then jumped over. It certainly looks like it's still a present factor. That doesn't look right either. Where else could I draw it to? I don't know. Maybe up here? $12.80 or something like that. That's not even something I've even considered. It's probably just another drop zone, like 14. That would make sense. This is like way beyond. Actually, that does look kind of right. That one looks a little bit better. I feel like there's an important piece to the puzzle right here, because this is a really evident kind of moving middle, if you will. Maybe I just haven't drawn this far enough. Maybe that's all there is to it. If I just let the wave continue. We're at 361 on AMC, so we're trying to go for that 365. Think 365 is even more important than 350, so we'll see what happens there. It's pretty important. How is NU stock doing? Not awesome. I don't mind flipping back and forth here and there, but it was down about 1%. It's back up to 1134. When we're talking about this, you really just want to be careful and see what happens right now. If it's a hook, it'll stop and then drop back down. You just don't want to see it come back below. I don't think we want to see it come back below 118 again, unless this forms like a longer bottom and it's like a reaccumulation. Does that make sense? So if we bottom out here and form a little range, and then it has like a spring, that would be an acceptable way to come back down through 118. But at this point, it got really exhausted and then dropped back down and made a lower low compared to where we were building out, although it is a rising wedge. Doesn't look like my favorite anymore. And I was saying that I don't think I traded it well. I think I missed the trade. I don't know exactly where it would have been, probably down here. Maybe just out of impatience or just thinking that it was ready to go, and it really wasn't. The issue is that it reads to me like a stock that's trying to hit an upper target on weakness. So that makes sense if it's bound to kind of drop and come back down and correct again in the future, that this is like trying to make a leg up, but it's not ultimately going to be hugely successful in that. Like it'll get there, but it's going to be a struggle. And yeah, so I'm not convinced that once it gets to that point, that if it does get there, whether that's 1190 or 1250, that it doesn't just then capitulate really fast and drop down. So looks a bit like a widening too, that you can see it's like widening on the way up, volume is dropping. So if this manages to make the moves and can continue up, I think it's going to be on weakness. And that's kind of what this reads like. Is every time it's made an advancement, it's bled down pretty far. It makes an advancement and bleeds down. Tries to make an advancement, bleeds down. Like it's repeated throughout here. And those are just like repeated signs of weakness. So I think it's maybe the technical play here is true, that it may indeed pop up. Maybe even takes till Tuesday or whatever. It may indeed pop up, but then I would very heavily consider it weak as soon as it does that, because it's struggling. So it's struggling to just make this upside possible. There is buying here, but it's like there's nothing to write home about. Do you get a widening off of a bottom back to the upside that's not a flag? Is that possible in the market? Yeah. It doesn't happen very often, though. Usually this kind of emotion, if it's doing this and it's kind of losing steam as it goes and it's about to get oversold, that's a pretty sure sign that it's going to dump. Which is why I bought puts early on, and I actually bought them for way out. I went ahead and got out of them because I was like, I'll probably get a better entry if it does go up. But yeah, this is the look of it right now. So just kind of wait on it today, see if it can form out another bottom right here. Then we might get that last leg. If it dumps through here, I'm not going to hold on to much hope, especially if it comes back through 11. I think the play is done. It's just double top with a drop. It's not going to be a good look. At that point, there's really no point in holding any bullish position anyways. Even if you think it hits this and rallies and has like a massive spike up, who cares? Like, you're probably better off out and then back in, probably. So, yeah, that's where that stands. It's kind of like everything else, though. Like, there's a sense of, I've been saying the same thing all morning. There's a sense that, like, yeah, we may have needed to have a little bit of a rest after the rally that happened over the last couple of days. And I don't think everything is necessarily done, but it definitely doesn't look like it's ready to just rocket necessarily today. Who knows? This afternoon might be completely different. Maybe we'll get like a 4-hour red candle and then get a different 4-hour green candle, reversal. Yeah. So this is kind of interesting to me because when I look at wave interactions, I'm usually trying to determine, see, it's like interesting. It's like turning up, turning the other way. I'm usually trying to determine where it goes if it doesn't do something. Like this to me seems pretty obvious. Like if it doesn't come up and break above here around 5, it comes right back down. It should come back down and go pretty low pretty quick. I don't know. That to me looks really, really obvious. But I also think that if it breaks out, it's kind of like, well, how do I know? Where do I see that? And I think it's the same area for a lot of reasons. One, of course, being that would be the breakout of the widening coming down. But I'm curious about this this wave, because if it drops, that would be for the purpose of creating what we call like that slingshot. And it definitely seems right to me that it's in the right place. But it's so long term. So this might be one that, unfortunately, takes a lot longer than expected. And I don't know, but then the one thing that's missing here is this red line. See how it doesn't match? I find that to be peculiar. Yeah, maybe it's like a steeper arc, and I'm just kind of missing it completely. It could be. I don't know. I might revisit this in my own time, my own free time, as I feel like I'm missing something. It definitely tried to grab this trend and failed. And that's really significant. And usually that's where you see that 50-50 come to fruition. However, we don't have like this missing piece here. So I'm wondering if it is indeed meant to be here. Maybe it's coming off of this 624 gap as like the 50% retracement. There's just no way to kind of fudging it. I don't like that. It's not that important that you find an arc. The arcs are just arcs, and you can, for whatever you want to say about it, and I think there's a lot that can be said. I don't personally like the arcs in TradingView because they're not weighted. You don't have weighted tangents on them, which makes it impossible to draw them dynamically. You have to use like only the 3 anchors, and then you're kind of guessing on middle. In 2020 for AMC, the middle was where it crossed up roughly, where it crossed up over here on September going into the 13th, which would suggest that this is pretty long-winded, that this would take at least till September, maybe slightly later in October. It doesn't seem impossible. Maybe that's right. Almost like that better anyways. In order for that to be true, you'd have a secondary action here that comes up and retests them and then fails. This could stay kind of elevated until March, if that's the case. You do get a January pop, but it doesn't continue, and it kind of walks its way through these levels. And that exit trajectory seems right to me. It might even be good for us if this is delayed, because for some folks that don't really care that much about it, they might be more interested in it when and if it comes back down. And if you had an opportunity to get in really, really low, it certainly would be a massive incentive, as opposed to the LPS, which is hard to read, and you probably wouldn't want to get in until it holds here and breaks out. There's not really as great of a trade. It's still there. It just doesn't feel as strong, right? So none of these trajectories really make a lot of sense. these two red ones that stick out like a sore thumb. I'm a bit biased on this because I think it looks so much like 2020 for AMC that I keep thinking it's going to be the same, and it may not be. It could have a lot of different changes on it, you know. A lot of things could change. I think this is in the right place though. If it's going to do a distributive top and try to come down again, it would be here. And probably has an extension up to like 560. That's the wall. If it fails, then it comes back down again. It becomes very, very low. Very rapidly. Tries to get low. Probably breaks through the bottom. And then if it can manage to build an accumulation, then it can run. This would create a really wide creek, but you could probably get in at like 4. And the rest of this is kind of just is what it is. The positions, I mean. It may be, though, that I'm overestimating how far it goes. Maybe there's a halfway point here, and it's much longer winded. Because AMC has this like massive move, and it's very abrupt and strong. MPW actually has this chopping zone when it comes down, and that's not there, not really, on AMC. So it could be that there's a longer period of the middle and it's not like a singular move. And that may make more sense. All right, well, I'm done with this for now. Let's move on. It's not giving me anything new. So, still a bit bullish on it. I'm do one more thing and then I'll move on. I just want to check the OBV real quick. Unbalanced volume's breaking out. See, this looks finished, this S-curve. I think that S-curve is done. Man, this is a weird setup. It definitely shows me a lot of the same thing, which is, I guess, good. So if that came lower, it would look like this, like a massive distribution effort. 1, 2, cat ear, major cat ear. It's really close. It's trying to break out. It's trying. This is the play right here. If you're looking at MPW, there's a compression that's happening. It may not take off till Tuesday, I think, is a possibility here for sure. And it has to break out above this. This could still technically capitulate and come down. It's not a guarantee. But if it can manage to hold these levels and break above, I'm going to say, just again, make that higher high here above 430. And hold it. I think it's going to make a pretty sizable move. I think it's going to probably pop up to like 560. So it's $1 move. That's a decent chunk. Yeah, that'll be like a 30% pop. I have my reservations about it. For sure. But I don't think it's a bad play. it's just having trouble. Like, I don't know. Maybe that's a good thing if you're interested in just buying some shares. It's just chilling out for a bit. You can take your time. It keeps chopping down. It's, yeah, I don't know. The market's weird. I've created in my head, I've created these like hard and fast rules about that really are based on institutional understanding of how the trades typically work. And if there's a move to the upside that then comes down lower immediately, I tend to look at that unfavorably. In reality, a backup's a backup. I mean, if it backs up and it holds a higher high or a higher low, then it doesn't have to be bearish just because it came down low. And sometimes I read the chart a little wrong, you know. Well, so ACHR, this kind of looks done to me. Yeah, this is kind of bearish. So you have a very strong daily divergence here. Volume's dropping. Volume's getting low. RSI is coming down away from the price. From a technical standpoint, it looks bearish. They're probably using a lot of this volume to sell, which would make sense. And I'm sure you all are aware of what I'm going to say next. I'm like kind of a one-trick pony in this regard. So there's a little bit of a narrowing, but it didn't hold. It ended up breaking down. I'm curious about this 31 degrees, if it's about the same as this, because it may end up being like a flag. I think it is. Yeah, pretty close. So we're going to just say that's a flagging motion, not a rising wedge breakdown. But it did technically lose this trend here, the steeper trend. If this has another move, what you can use is the wave cross then. That is fairly reliable if you do it right. And it's a bit tricky sometimes, but usually the most logical thing is the correct thing. So right now you can see like the middle here at 990 is that major, I don't know what you want to call it right now, probably supply level. Like this seems to be the whole point of coming back up, was to come right back here to like 985 or thereabouts, a previous floor. So this kind of wraps around it. The other way to do it would be start over here. This is a little more accurate in some ways because this up thrust is, again, a failed attempt to try to rally, I guess, forward and then drops through. But there's a early check here that comes back beneath it, and this ends up defining that downward motion. So the definition of that motion started here. So this may actually be a better middle, and I think this is a more accurate middle in some ways because it seems to match that trend a lot better. So even though this is a 50-50 that comes around 990, I probably wouldn't use 990 as the middle. If you want to have like an alternative, you can. So what am I doing is I'm creating like a structure for a wave. So what I'm suggesting to you is that if and when this does pop again, if it comes back up to the upside, assuming that it can even, do that, that would be a very likely zone to watch. It does not have to go all the way to the top. That would be misleading. It could be a very simple like up thrust that hits like 1079 or something like that. So you may want to go down to like 2 hour and just see what's going on. And it broke out of its trend, left a gap. Again, it failed to cross 960, but there's another gap up here And that's what I was looking for, is to see if there was another marker, and there is. So it's another institutional marker around 10:45. And then the last one would be this ledge here at, that's the next support resistance at 11:17. This is on Tuesday. So it's reasonable to suggest, though not, again, not a guarantee, reasonable suggest that this does indeed, you can see on the 2 hour it's oversold. This does indeed rally again to the upside. Your targets are not the highest. You've got one target that goes to 10:45 and another that goes to 11:17. There's plenty of space here to happen on the smaller time frame. So even though that larger time frame looks like it could just dump, there's enough here to suggest that it's currently trying an uptrend. It's trying to hold it. And that's important. So, yeah, right there. A lot of it may be determined by what happens today. Same thing as everything else. It looks like the opening candle this morning was a push up, push down that pushed low. So I'm not really sure what to make of that. It's just like everything else. It looks like this EMA on the 1 hour will be crossed at about 9. So that might be a good entry point. So no matter what happens, if this kind of builds out sideways or chops, 9 might give you a good entry point. And then I would consider that this may chill out Friday, and then Tuesday, maybe it rallies, something like that. Probably a little bit weaker. Like big sell-offs. This is essentially like up thrust, up thrust, up thrust, up thrust, as in a rising distribution pattern. So you see how this up thrust pushed above the top and then dropped low? It tells you there was a weakness. See, it pushed up, tried to break out, and then it sold all the way back down. It closed high, so maybe it went reverse. I don't know. I'm not looking at the values, but it closed high. So it opened, maybe it dropped first, maybe it rose first. I don't know. Either way, it looks like the spread is starting to widen. So that could signal that this is going to have like a bit of a, like a widening spread. It looks about right to me. So that's what I'd be watching for here. So is it a good trade? It's okay. I don't think you're going to get a lot off of options. It's kind of like NU. I'm not really positive. I guess if the volatility is high enough, you might get that. I'm going to suggest to you that this is like an elaborate hooking action, and that once this is done, it comes down and drops off of here. This is probably what it looks like. Something like this. And it starts a downward trek. Because on the big picture, this is pretty bearish looking. I'm not going to be able to say much more than that. If it rallies, it rallies. How would you know if it rallies, Booksy? Well, it would hold here. So the conditions that would need to be met for a rally would be a support here at this top, because this is previously a resistance, so it'd have to push above, and then it distributes like 3 times through it. This would have to push above 980 and then hold 980. That's exactly the place it will also probably distribute if it drops. So I would suggest to you that if this, and it just, to me it looks bearish, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but this is obviously divergent. I think this will pop up on the daily multiple times and try, it may even like extend upward and then dump the other way. That's my thought. Seems most likely here. If it's a flag on the RSI, then yeah, you have a case that perhaps it doesn't do that, but how are you going to know it's a flag? Well, if it breaks out and it also holds 980. So it's the same question. So in order for this to kind of continue and have another leg up, I feel like it's already kind of done, and it's going to hook. I think that's what we're seeing, is like a hook here. In order for it to continue, though, it would have to basically hold this level like with strength, and it would look different. It would have to be a pretty strong, obvious hold here, and then it goes back to the upside. I'm less inclined to think that happens, so just so you're aware, like my opinion of it is that it's bearish. It might have a couple more up thrusts in it. It seems likely to me. Just kind of get out the last bit of buyers, trade out, you know, strong hands the weak hands, allow for another sell-off, couple sell-offs here maybe, boom, boom. And then we'll see. Usually that's about it. If it makes this kind of a move up and then fails, I would suggest at that point, I mean, you can see it's written into this almost, because in the beginning, see how this drop right here? I'd suggest it's likely that was important. This looks like a weakness to me. I can't stress enough, like, I know that these rules are just there and they're not always met, but when it has that push up, you shouldn't, if it's strong, it shouldn't be making like lower lows. And that's like the first thing that happened right here. So it opened at like 650 and then it drops to like 625. Well, it shows there's just an overwhelming amount of sellers, and then they keep it going, obviously, and probably gonna do it again here. This is like a pinch point, and there's gonna be like an iterative version of this right here. Pinch, pinch, kind of do the same thing, up, and then drop. And then it drops, it should be probably be pretty substantial drop over time. It won't drop all at once. It'll probably hit this gap at like 6 and then rally again, you know, to whatever this trend has become, and then drop again. And then the next time you might get a good buy-in potentially is over here at like 450, which is low, but it is a backup. So this could be thought of as like an SOS with a backup. Potential there, you know. And I have no idea. This could be the beginning of a longer run. But for now, like, that's as far as I'd probably take it. Yeah, same deal. Looks like a double up thrust. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is just a heavy volume top. It's almost the same exact trade. These are aviation. It's interesting. Yeah, sectors tend to run together, I guess, so I suppose that's part of it. I'd hate to be wrong about one and then be wrong about both. That would certainly stink. But to me, it just looks the same. It looks like the exact same trade. I don't know. There's nothing particularly positive about a high volume top that comes above supply and can't seem to hold it as support. So right now it's trying to hold this 791. It's a little different because there's like multiple ledges here, but this one is trying its best. Maybe the better one would be 762, 64. But see, it already made the dive down. This is actually a lot easier. If it drops beneath this level here, again, it's going to crash. Like, it's going to crash through here. Honestly, it could be a good put play. It looks pretty simple because there's a massive bearish divergence on RSI, massive volume. Yeah, I would suggest if it drops through again, it's going to crash hard. We can find a more exact target for that, perhaps. Maybe it could even come all the way down to like 580 or something. It's probably going to come check $6. Okay, I see it now. I was wondering why like that creek is so high. I think it's not. I think this is actually where the creek is. So I think we're likely going to have that same kind of like distribution action. This one has the same exact thing. It's really identical. It's got this rally point here. There's a intersection at a gap going into like next week. It really to me reads almost the same way. Like we might get like a double up thrust here as a sort of a hook, maybe. And then if it wants to fill the gaps, it's not a guarantee. That just turns into like a head and shoulder. See that? It's like a head and shoulder motion. And if it drops through, it's going to dump like nobody's business, I think, over time. The technical head and shoulder target here would be about 50% of the head. It's usually like 51% off of that drop, which is there. So I've got it about right. So it's setting up, in the motion of this head, it's already setting up enough distance to get from the support down to that moving average, which is really the next support. If you look carefully, it's like right there. That's the same distance. So that's baked into the head. No. No. So that's baked into the head motion here. And the shoulder is just missing. Shoulders are weird though, because like as much as I say like this is probable if the market rallies and yada yada yada, I don't necessarily think it has to go that high. Like technically the shoulder cats are doing crazy things, as cats do every day, something. So I guess one of my reservations about this is that shoulders are kind of strange. They can be at a bit of an angle. The expectation of this shoulder really is the coming back to testing of this trend. That's really what I see when I talk about head and shoulders. Like I see the wave that's trying to come back up, and usually it intercepts around the same place. But this shoulder itself is at an angle, so you could see that that doesn't actually come that high. It may not get that gap. It may leave the 940, you know. Either way, it could be a good put play if it follows through. I don't see why not. I'm not against playing puts. I'm going to put a possible put play. The confirmation of it is like 760 down to 650 or whatever. It's not like the biggest thing, but if you played like the risk on, that's a 15% trade. If you play the risk on, you probably get like double that. So yeah, dude, I think it's gonna go down. It's the same thing. It's got that similar like SOW in the beginning, like struggle bus trying to get up, weakening volume, weakening power. So power. Oh boy, discussing it. No, Luke's right. There's no reason to, in some ways, like, all right, effort matters, right? So if it takes less effort to drive the price up, leaving less volume, that's important. It's kind of like floating up. In some ways, you want that in a spring action. We've talked about this before, like heavy selling followed by almost like a floating up. You don't really want high volatility, high volume here so much as you did right here on the very, if this is a bottom, right, then that would be appropriate. But it depends on the price action. Like if we saw this, and let's say it came down and this was like a rising wedge where it's like clearly like narrowing, I don't think anybody would look at that in their right mind and say that a losing volume on a rising wedge is a good thing, especially if it's in the midst of a downtrend. That just goes against literally everything that we know about technical volume analysis, range analysis, etc. So like there are certainly instances where it may be appropriate, as in the case of like a spring, where you want to see, in some ways, you want to see that lack of volume right after the bottom. But most springs that we've seen on AMC traditionally have the kind of the classic Wyckoffean turnabout, right? And so that bottom has like higher volume here in the midst of that. And then once it comes up, that's when the volume lessens, especially if it gets back above, let's say like a floor. Once the volume is back above the floor, it's just kind of floating. And there's a lack of, and then usually you get like a buy-in, right? Something like this, right? So on and so forth before it takes off. That's good. That's what you want. So volume by itself is not enough. It's volume and price action. Right now, looking at it like we kind of did with NU this morning, does this look a little bit like a rising wedge? Yeah. I think looking at that yesterday would have been pretty easy to tell that that's probably going to drop and at least have some kind of a back test. So how do we know if it continues? Well, we don't. That's the short answer. You don't know if it's going to continue or not. You can say that you do, but we don't know. Ultimately, it still comes down to the exact same level we talked about this morning, which is this 365 level. And y'all, I've been saying it. I'm not trying to like beat a dead horse here, but like this isn't broken out yet. So you cannot possibly call out a bottom and say it's definitely a bottom. You could say, I think it's a bottom. You could say it has signs of a bottom. But you don't call out a bottom till it jumps the creek. And this hasn't done that. Did it jump the local creek here? Yeah. Did it jump like the bigger trend? No. Which is my concern, was that if it comes up here and it can't succeed, it could just come right back down even into Friday. I'm not thinking that's as likely now as I did on like Tuesday or whenever I first said it. Man, these cats, dude. Stay out of our kitchen. No. What is going on? It's like they didn't want to eat their food this morning, and then they ate like late. Should have just taken the food away. They need to stop doing that. It really bugs me. Anyways. Yeah, so I don't know. If anyone's sitting here saying it's already broken out, it's going, they're wrong. It hasn't broken out. I think that's pretty obvious. If anyone's sitting here saying, I think it's done and it's rebounding, you can still make that case. I would suggest that that's a decent high volume bottom. I would also suggest that it's very possible that it's not done yet, and that we're not quite there. But if you were playing this just on the basis of like breakouts, then you could have done this in a wave format where it goes from here to here to here, which is what I've been suggesting, is like you watch it wave out. Those are great trades. Those are easy to trade trades too, because usually once it's there and it's like clearly breaking out, the strength is turned back up, easy to move from one to the next to the next. That's the basis of every trade I've made this week. So I don't think it's a bad trade. But 365 seems to be that level of most important, at least for now. And I mean, look at it. Look where it's at. Right? And then looking back at this, you know, you can see the up thrust followed by the S curve here, the S curve being these cat ears. You know, are we eventually going to come back up and hit 4? I think so. But how do we get there? You know, we rally. That's kind of it. I have this lower, but you could take it higher and do something like that. Similar ideas, okay? That you're coming back up above each of those waves, and then as you break out, you would head towards 415. And that's just like everything else right now. That's my big concern of, yeah, we might just stop. Then I'm not going to keep repeating the same thing I did yesterday, but we might just stop there. We may not go beyond this little region. If it decides, if the market doesn't like it and decides to do a little distribution here, I'll redraw it, then you're probably going to see it may be really tight the way this goes. If it ends up continuing all the way up, I'm not even convinced it's going to go as high as I said there. It may get stopped up even lower. It's like 2 spots that I'm really thinking. One is right here, and then the other is over here, a little bit higher. Yeah, I mean, there's no reason why that can't come back down, which I've been trying to say cautiously that while I'm all about a January run up and I'm happy if it happens, don't get me wrong, I'd be happy. I'm also like really cautious about expecting it here right this second. Anyways, so today and tomorrow we'll watch 365. If it breaks that, I think we're going to see it move back to 410. Be a big reaction. At that point, it's anybody's guess, you know. If it takes longer up top and rallies, this is what I was thinking on MPW, is like you could kind of like fake it out by having like it look like it's sort of rallying and then form what seems to be like a reaccumulation. And it could end up taking like most of the month. And it may be that like by February, you're like, oh, it's still possible. We're going to go. We've reclaimed this or we reclaimed that. This is possible. But depending on how this sets up, I'd be really curious, because if it breaks out here and it doesn't check at all, it just kind of takes us up to the top above 4 to 430. So for example, let's say it broke out Tuesday and just rockets all the way up to the top, and there's no check on anything, it just kind of takes off. It does leave that door open for like coming back down and checking this creek, you know. So it definitely begs the question of, does it hold? Maybe it's a pretty important question, because if it doesn't, then you're talking about potentially new lows. I mean, that's significant. And this just becomes like a gigantic cat ear, which it's super easy to see it visually. So I'm not really sure if other people don't understand what I'm seeing or they don't care, because they think that it doesn't matter. Yeah, that's it right there. Like, I don't know how you can't see that if you don't see it. That ear 1, wave, ear 2, possible drop here. Well, how do we know? Ear 2 will not cross up and over itself. You know, the bullish jump would look like a bullish jump. It should jump over whatever creek's available and then continue. That's like the bull jump. If it comes up and it craps out, it might even have like a little up thrust or something. That's the bear scenario, you know. Usually that's what happens, because it looks like it's going to go and then it just fails right back through the creek. Often it pushes above the previous ear here. It doesn't have to do that, but it does do it a lot on AMC. So That's not complicated. It is frustrating because you're like, well, then just tell me what it's going to do. I don't know what it's going to do. They did not fill the gap. That should concern you, like it concerns me. There's another gap down below. They did trade. They're trading right now in this area that we've not previously traded in, but that doesn't mean that that's necessarily where the spring is. There's no divergence to speak of anymore, so we don't have that going for us. If the bottom from back here in October to now were heavily divergent on RSI, I'd suggest that it's going to make a major correction. But that's not going for us right now. Like, we don't have that anymore. It's gone. Doesn't exist. So I don't know. Looking at it, it seems just really painfully obvious to me anyways that that's a potential stopping point right here. I just don't know why anyone would look at that and think that it has to be bullish. And it's really odd because I'm talking about in circles about it, I guess, to some degree. We're just talking about the same chart on MPW. It's the same thing. It looks more obvious on MPW, I think, to me. It's like, yeah, that could definitely stop there. It doesn't have to keep going. It seems more obvious to me on MPW than it does on AMC, but it's funny how we don't want to, and I'm talking specifically to bulls that are just like, no, it's going to go. I'm happy that you have conviction. You have to have conviction to play a move, but I can't unsee that possibility. So hopefully I'm wrong and it turns around and it breaks out. But I don't see how you possibly could know that until up here. It's very high up. I suppose it would be like wherever this jumps over. I don't know exactly where it's going to hit. I have a feeling it's going to do something similar to what I've drawn, like where it'll come up high and hit like 450, like on the dot or something, and then drop low to like 415 to retest the 4s. And then if it tries to go again, that's probably where we're going to find our answer. Because if it tries to go again and if it jumps up and over, I think it'll be bullish and we'll see it take off. And we'll see that like continuation all the way up to at least 6s and then possibly beyond to near 20s or whatever. But if this doesn't break out and over and it sort of head fakes or whatever, I think it's gonna dump, So it'll be pretty quick, I think, and easy to see, because if it has a upthrust to like 450 or something like that and hits that top, it'll look like a higher high, which is good. That is a positive. But then we'll be able to tell on the next move, more than likely. If it can't break above and it drops back through, probably bearish. What about the scenario where it just goes into a spring locally? Isn't that possible, Booksy? Yes. This one is the worst one because it looks bearish and then it turns bullish. Well, first it looks bullish, then it looks really bearish, then it turns back to bullish. So what this is that it fails to make an advancement and it actually spring actions through the chart. When this happens, you typically don't get like an upthrust. So that's what happened back here. And it is another way that it can form because it's kind of like a spring action, right? This actually did have a bit of an upthrust. Check that, and then it backed up. But it doesn't go back above. What's important here is it doesn't go back above the previous tops. You see how it stayed low? That's like really, really significant. So even though it pushed the creek, which is the resistance, it doesn't actually go back above the previous tops. So when that happened, I was like, oh, I'm really bullish on this or whatever, right? Because it came up and it stayed beneath it. That's significant. In the distribution model, almost always, if there's that secondary motion, like I said here, if it comes up above the top, that's really a big part of the distribution. Is like the UT, the UTAD are literally always about going up to the supply again. Like you're pumping over the supply to trap bears or to trap bulls. And in the event of an accumulation, it could be very similar, but you usually don't see that attempt to trap. It's very, very similar. Okay, and I know that that's going to frustrate some people because they're like, well, what the heck, dude? This is like almost exactly the same. Yeah, I know. I'm aware. And this is why when you go read, unfortunately, this is where Wyckoff kind of, I think, makes it really difficult. Because if you go read about accumulation and redistribution or reaccumulation and distribution, you find that those diagrams look almost identical minus like a couple little key parts. So those are the key parts. So this is a bearish result right here. There's probably one more. You guys are not going to like this either. So every one of these is like partnered with another, right? Why not? They really, in theory, there's like an infinite amount of ways that you can traverse a range. If we can narrow it down to like 4 possibilities, that's actually pretty good. The other one is that, and this is sort of what happened in a couple AMC distributions. The one that we had at the beginning of this whole structure was a lot like this. And then there's another one that happened in, I want to say in 2023. That's also really similar. You probably remember it. So in this case, there were, it's like a cattier, and it can have like its own little distribution action at the end of the cattier or whatever. But the key here is that it comes back through the creek. So it tries to make you think that it's actually this, but it actually is a sell-off. And you'll usually find that there's like a longer-winded sideways action that accompanies it. So it defines a creek early on, and then it tries to push above it. And when it goes up, it forms like a distributive top, which again would look like a UTAD or a UT with a UTAD. And then it ultimately comes back through. And usually on this one, there's like a secondary drop that happens here. Now, this one, I feel like I've identified this one correctly like a few times. I have identified it incorrectly maybe like once, because there was an instance where it went to an SOS and then had a backup. And that's really misleading as well, because the SOS with a backup could look like an SOS that then backs up to the creek, like this guy. Because this could be like an SOS that backs up. And it might appear to you to be very similar to this, because you're like, oh, it's just an SOS that's like backing up to the creek. But again, like the difference is usually pretty obvious in the top, because the top is highly volatile and high volume volatility. Usually those up thrusts are there at that peak. It's tested the top like twice and it hasn't gone forward. Usually it's fairly obvious that it's like a micro version of a distribution. And that's all it really is that this on the whole is like a 1-2 followed by a 1-2 followed by a 1-2 that just keeps doing the same thing in a shrinking pattern until it finally like craps out. They're all pretty similar. But this is kind of like the breakdown zone for if you see something like this and it's clearly very distributive. I'm usually pretty decent at identifying it at that point. I'm like, yeah, that doesn't look good. I've seen enough of the distribution on AMC to know what that sort of looks like. So if it breaks down beneath that creek after trying to go over the top, no bueno. That's not good. It's dunsies, right? This just happened up here, by the way. By the way, oh, it did. Yeah, it did. And it actually broke down right there, right? Like, that was no bueno. It's going to go way back down, maybe distribute lower. Hey, what's up, Rally? Good to see you. PGHL and Wolf, sure. So how would I trade this if I'm a bull? If I'm bullish right now, the way I would trade it, obviously, is cautiously, but I think based on this setup, it's probably going to look faster than I've drawn it. I have it going way out, but I'm starting to think that's not quite right. You probably end up being pretty quick, at least at first. I'm not positive. There might be like multiple up thrusts here that I'm missing, but I would suggest that Tuesday kind of starts that move up and out, and then probably at that point we'll see. Walk it back down, and then this is where I would expect somewhere over here anyways. So if I'm bullish, I want to say that my first inclination here would be that the and I know I'm just inventing this line right here, this top line, so just keep that in mind. If you don't know what I'm doing there, I'm inventing that line. It doesn't exist yet because I'm assuming where that top is. That top might be sooner, it might be later. This would move, all right? It would. So right now, take it with a grain of salt. The way I would trade it if I'm bullish right now is I would be trading this to the upside, which I am, by the way. I'd be trading from the bottom here as far as I could up, possibly to 404. And then if it makes an extension on Tuesday or whatever, if it makes that bleed up, I don't know if it will. But if it does that, then you would be like, good, I'm in a good shape. I personally would probably be done there, and then I would wait for that breakout, because it's not going to hurt you to see an SOS and then get in over here. You know what I mean? So for me as a bull, if I'm like bullish on it, I would wait for the jump and then the breakout. And it's a high risk situation because, yeah, you could be in a situation like this where it's kind of faking out, breaking out. You're going to have to watch the range. But if the range forms well on the top, backs up, has a healthy looking accumulation, and then rallies again, it'd probably be pretty fast, but you could get back in. I don't think it'd be that hard. And I don't think the dramatic, like, you're going to miss out kind of nonsense applies here, because in reality, most of the markup's going to be here up anyways. Like, if you look at the grand scheme of things, your options contracts, and you could always scale out if you want. Like, let's say you had some and you wanted to wait and see, you could just scale out of some, and that's probably even healthier. So I am assuming right here that it breaches this guy. We haven't talked about that yet, and I'm probably not going to address it too much. I'm kind of assuming that it goes above there. For the sake of argument, I think it might be a like a secondary rally point. This Tuesday itself, like for example, we might hit this. Shoot, we could hit this on Friday, right? And be chilling out around 4 on Friday. It's possible. And then Tuesday might be like a secondary rally above it. You know what I mean? So if we're in that situation, then great. Easier to read, whatever. Okay. Still, that's the way I'd probably trade it and leave it at that. So maybe this rallies up and closes around 4 on Friday. And then you'd have a possible pump on Tuesday away from this. And then this leads us into kind of the end game here. I might be kind of right about where it hits because that looks pretty good to me. And then where the SOS would be over here. I'm still, like, it's still guesswork on my part, but I think the idea there is probably pretty accurate. Going up into Tuesday like that, and then Wednesday through Friday, probably slumping back until Monday. And then you'd know maybe Monday what happens next. You guys are like, they're not going to wait that long. It's going to rally and be just done. Maybe. It's pretty close. That trajectory that we've got down low is pretty close to the final result trajectory. If it goes through late February, it's like right where it should be. So it certainly is a possibility. Yeah, I think that's an easy enough way to trade it though, would be to trade out here and then trade back in here. Simple enough. So here and then here again. You could trade into the bottom, but you're going to risk the distribution. So it would just be a matter of like stop losses and stuff. Otherwise, that might be fine. Like hold that bottom, trade in. It's more of a high risk trade, but yeah. I'm going to check something real quick. I think yesterday we were talking about the daily RSI. Yeah, I don't know, man. It just looks like the middle of a cat ear to me. Like, I still think it's the same question mark. This to me looks like the center mark, the S-curve, and then it just hasn't made like the actual ear over here, and I just don't think that's happened yet. And it could be very fast, but it has to make that jump. Because if it doesn't, it's going to just dump this down. This could be where we finally get like an actual deviation though. Like if it does come down again, it'd be interesting to see if on that drop, like for example, if this goes pretty high and then on that drop like the 50s or something and it doesn't continue, it'd be interesting to see if when this comes back down, if that is divergent, then you'd have a really strong case. And you know what? I'm still talking about twos, but who knows? Maybe at that point we don't go down that low. We just go down to like the gap fill or something, 292. You know, we'll wait until we get there. But that would be interesting as well, because then you'd have a really strong case for a buy-in, like a super strong case, as opposed to like a lukewarm. Yeah, it's got to be above here. I'm sorry. Sorry, not sorry. I'm not gonna. It is what it is. 485 area or whatever it would be like where it would start breaking out. All right, so you said mRNA, and then I had a couple other requests. Let's try to get to them. So let's take a look. I'm going to go to some of my charts that I'm not using right this second. NU still just hanging out, 1133. We may need to take a look at this later and look closer, but right now I'll just leave it. Hang on just a second. Just a second. Sorry, guys. I check something real quick. Yeah, man, this did the same thing as the rest of the market. It dove low, and then it's just chilling out. But I'm curious about something, so hold on. I didn't want to get into IWM yesterday. I need to know where that level is, though. I think it's still 224. Yeah, it's struggling. That's a nice candle, though. I just need to know where that level's at. Sorry. Started something and then turned away, looked back. Let me check one more thing here. Hourly. Yikes. It's like a triple top right there. What is going on? I really dislike this kind of stuff. These kind of moves. That's what I'm staring at all day today. Oh. I feel like it just needs to come down and then turn around. I'd be happier actually if it dropped first. I feel like that'd be possibly a good entry point even. This doesn't look terrible. This is just so obviously like down. But it's already cut through here on the 30-minute. No, the 30 minutes holding up surprisingly well. I think the idea of like a chill out day is probably the right idea here, but I'm just gonna wait on it. All right, mRNA. May check back later this afternoon and see if something's changed. Got time. I'm gonna go to the weekly. This is a big chart, so I want to see this motion all together. mRNA looks like it started in 2019. It looks like distribution because of the, I mean, it's not just because it's coming down, but it's because of the volume. You see how these like are repeated up thrusts with high volume? It was like 1, 2, 3, and then it pumped really high. And you can see it's like way down from the top. Moderna, obviously being the COVID, I think the COVID vaccine, I think that you have a case here that it kind of explains itself, because like if COVID is when COVID is like relevant, right? Then it's like this hyper important company, which just so happens to be public a year before COVID. Conspiracy theory, Booksy. I'm just saying. And then March 2020, it takes off. I mean, that's not suspect at all, right? Whatever. Yeah, I don't see any reason why we would expect this to be valued up here, right? If it's not relevant anymore. Who knows in the future what happens. You guys tell me what you think. Do you think that it's valuable anymore? I don't think it should be valued this high. And to me, it looks like the market knows that. So this is a case of walking down through these levels that were used. You know, if you're going to play like a falling knife here, I'm sure there's an argument to be made that this could rally back up, maybe even to 54 before starting down again. It hasn't checked this top yet, so maybe. But I don't really have any other TA on this other than it's in a markdown period. Really, the failure is back here. Oddly, this is like the place that it stopped. It's a head and shoulders, sure, but you can see the advancement failed to do anything. It just tried to jump and then just slid down. Looks a lot like AMC's chart, to be honest. Like right here, recently, this reminds me of what happened in September with us, because we jumped a creek and then we just started sliding down, and then we had this big buy-in and then we just slumped. Right? And it looked like it was going to rally back above. It looks oddly similar to what happened right here in this, because this was a creek jump and it went from like the top down and it just slumped and then bought back in and then slid. So it's just distributive action to me. So we're in like a markdown phase. I wouldn't expect there to be, I mean, if there's rallies, but where it's at right now is very close to the top of that SOS when it got the contract. It is on it. This might be a logical place to settle for a bit. So again, if you're in for like a swing, I don't think it's a bad idea. It looks like it's come across on the weekly. Let's check like the 4-hour chart. Let's see where that's at. Yeah, same deal. Like, it's not confirmed divergence because it hasn't broken out here yet, but it is divergent so far. And you might say I'm a little bit obsessed with that, but I do think that's a really important indication. It just helps. It helps to have like multiple factors, like it's jumping over a trend, it's jumping over an EMA, it's lining up to, wave back to the upside, it's finished a bottom, it's got all kinds of things. Like as much as you can, if you've got 3 or 4 reasons why something's bullish, that's a lot better than just one. So I do like to look at sort of the basic stuff. So this could be divergent, but it's really hard to tell because this just went to like a major upthrust motion and sell down, and you can see like it went to being overbought. It hasn't yet become oversold, so this is not confirmed as a bottom in my mind at all. Like I think it's a speculative play right now because yeah, there's a gap above. This looks a little better to me here, which is the equivalent of saying it's jumped this creek, and that's likely true. So as an auto reaction play, it's very probable, maybe even likely, that it comes up here by this February 14th earnings. At the very least, that's triangulated, so. But who knows what happens between now and then. You could get an early gap fill with like an auto reaction and then kind of build out into like a distribution. That looks like a distribution to me. And then continue down. Because this is like a LSPY that broke above, and then ultimately what it's doing is it's retracing back down to the creek, which is the trend. So you can see the wave here from top to bottom. Seems like the that $28 level might be in mind, just based on that middle. So this would be an easy way to get back to that point. That $28 level is the original high here. All right, so this is a questionable divergence because it really hasn't confirmed yet. And I guess, again, the only real way to do that would be to look really close and see if that has jumped. I don't think it has. I think it's close. Yeah, it's like right on it. But not quite yet. Probably the easiest thing to do would be to trade, if you're going to trade it, is to trade above 35. If it breaks out here and goes above 35 and holds, then you've got an easy trade. Because if it gets to 35 at this point, it's broken the creek. And you've got a fairly reasonable trade on an auto reaction to whatever height. And I don't necessarily think it fills the gap. I was just saying that. I think it probably goes to like 40 or something. Some even number. 41.5 is where that gap is. I think it's probably going to go there at some point. But there's a lower, I'm curious about this. There's a lower trend here. So I wonder if it doesn't fill the gap, it just hits like 40. It's a $5 move. It's not a bad move. Here to the top, it's 12%. I would venture, as soon as it does that, it probably comes back down. This is my guess. But I would venture that as soon as it does that, it probably comes back down and makes a lower low. And it may not be lower than this bottom, but it would definitely be lower than 33.59. That's 31.94. So yeah, I'm gonna guess that happens. That it goes ahead and shows some weakness because there's already like a proclivity to come to this trend. So it tries to go backwards. And this turns into like kind of a widening, like a breakout within a little bit of a widening, so to speak. Something like that. And then it comes back up, and we probably get a longer rally here, like a few weeks or something. And this is where it comes up into earnings. And I don't know where exactly it'll be at earnings, but something like that makes sense to me. It's not about necessarily checking this top again, although just happens to be a triangulation there that's pretty clean. It seems likely. Worst case is I'm a little off and this is like the pivot and it doesn't ever come that high. It comes like over here, right? And this is like the pivot for that move. So either way, it doesn't really make a huge difference because you wouldn't buy in here until that happens anyways. So whether it's there or up higher doesn't make a huge difference. And then it drops low, and this is like where it finally comes down and hits that target. And I think we're right about that. I think it is $28. So let's take a look at the difference between 47 and 28 and see what that looks like. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. You see how this is like a halfway point right here at like 36.5? That's what we're talking about, the buy-in. Yep, and then this would like bleed back through it and then hold underneath it and break out, go as high as it can possibly go and then dump back through. It really makes the world a lot easier. Now, what happens after that, Booksy? Because I still see this high volume input right here. You really sure it's going to go down again? It kind of looks like the same thing that just happened. Yeah, it kind of does. I don't think that matters too much because, again, we're looking at an M1 here. There's still a possibility of an M2. And those things can expand outward pretty rapidly over time. You find that they just like keep building out until that breakout happens. My thought about why that might be is also tied to this outer mark, that this is a build out to get to this 4 hour, which is clearly buddied up with this downtrend, aka this cat ear creek here. So my thought is that after that 28 is hit, this then has like a much larger reaction. And I think at this point, it might be fair to say that this even goes up to whatever this triangulation is here. It might take a while to get there to like 54. So I think this could have like another pretty major rally. Just on technicals alone, that's what I would think. And it would probably sit here for a minute. It's not like it's going to go like immediately up. It would be like down and then chop, break back out. And I think it's likely that's where that happens. And then you're going to get a bigger range here to test the top. And see where we're going to go. Yeah, that makes sense because we haven't gone back and checked this level. We're not going to, if we don't do it here, we do it there. It seems pretty straightforward. And I hate to be like that guy because it's going to be obnoxiously long-winded, but you would potentially then have like an even bigger M at play that comes down lower. So it would just keep going until it doesn't. Veil? No, I don't remember that. Wolf? We'll have to check Wolf. That was asked of me. No, I don't really remember Veil. Some of these charts, I weirdly remember like every little piece of them, and then some of them just like, I have no memory of this. I have no memory of this place. Yeah, this looks weird. There's not much to say about it. It's pretty much just the same thing on repeat. It's distributive action until it isn't. So unless this comes back over like 12, I wouldn't touch it. It looks a lot like, and I don't know anything about this, you know. Iron ore. It's interesting. Kosan sold 4% of the company. Wow. Yeah, I don't know anything about the iron market. Sounds cool. Be an interesting thing to trade. I don't know, guys. It's just a wave pattern. So if it fails, the next in line would be way down here. It might be a cool place to like pick up a trade just for the heck of it. You know, if it ever comes back down to like 2 again, it probably has a decent rally. Just on the basis of the low. Interesting, because that volume structure here is already like really high selling, and it's already back down to lows. So maybe if there was an argument to be made for it, it'd be in that, like that structure. Because to me, it just looks like a carbon copy of what happened here, which makes sense because you'd have the push up, and then the UTAD is like a long-term distribution kind of action, and then this is where it finally like was like, nope, we're done. And usually this is where the sell-off kind of really hits hard. So if I'm looking at it from that perspective, yeah, this spike here would be the big drop. This is a weekly, and then you'd wait for, this is really nice because this was also a divergence, really easy to see. Huge bottom with a V-shaped recovery. It's really nice. Without overthinking it too much, I would say that the target region is still pretty low. Maybe even forming a bit of a, that's 21 degrees, yeah. May even be a little bit of a parallel structure here, which could help you track it down. Yeah, perhaps. Big dividend. That's good. I mean, if you were just buying when it's overbought or whatever, or oversold, excuse me, if you were just buying on that alone, you might say that it looks fine, a good buy-in place. I think this is a very difficult one to judge because of where it's at. It's at a really critical spot. So as soon as if it does drop, it's going to be probably not fun to be in. And it's a little longer term. Like this drop took a while. I would imagine it'd be similar here. And if it does go through, it'd probably go through here because this would be like a midpoint with like high volatility, and then sort of like this guy was. And then you would come back down to the floor. So again, like good news being that, hey, if that happens, and that does look like the trajectory here, there's a decent chance that by 2028, it's like popped back up considerably. Probably comes and jumps this line too. Is if we're looking at these as parallel structures, and that's what I'm kind of wondering right now, is the reaction comes back up and over the parallel. It's probably iterative. Yeah, so this hits like that low. This is like that trend right here. Hits that low trend, breaks out, rallies really hard to the top. This is like the previous drop off. This is the previous drop off. So you can see like right there, that's the drop off point. And then right here is the drop off point right there. So the last little ledge here arguably could be up here, but whatever. It should intersect roughly where that is. So I think that's a pretty solid iterative move. And it doesn't look like it would necessarily need to deviate if everything kind of goes as planned. It's already there. The structure's there. This could be one of those ones that's just easier than it should be when it gets to that point. So long term, very possibly a good trade here. And I don't know about the rest of this. You know, when this came up, when you look at it again long term, this ultimately becomes the place that it gets sort of stuck. It doesn't go back below this in the future. It just kind of gets hung up here. So that level is super critical going forward. And much the same, you might expect maybe even like a narrowing wedge of sorts on the big picture, that this doesn't ever really come significantly above 15 again for a while. If this is a sign of weakness like there was here, it would be very similar. So you would cross down the trend, just like this crossed over the trend. Everything kind of becomes a carbon copy, I know, but whatever. It doesn't have to be that way, but it could be very similar. And again, you're testing these tops, but just lower. So the whole thing turns into a bit of a repeat. It's kind of boring. That's kind of a boring way to look at it, but if this is the cycle of the stock, it's already done it twice. They may do it a third time. It's set up to at least give you this. I don't know what else will come of that, but so on and so forth, you know. To see what happens here. Maybe it makes a higher high or something, or makes a lower low. That could definitely change the future of the move. You know, this particular spot right here largely could determine what happens up top. But for now, it doesn't look like a buy, just because I think that, for me anyways, there's a decent amount of evidence that this could still slump quite a bit. Yeah, you see this little like hook on the RSI? See how it like dropped to oversold and then it like comes up again and then it dumps, and look at the rest of the dump is all that divergence. So like it traveled really far on the weekly, being like lower 50%. So it's very hard for me to look at this and say, oh, it's just going to bounce and go, when it's doing kind of the same thing. That was like an 81% drop. It's the same, basically the same spot. It's like slightly lower, which would imply that this even comes down further, you know, if you're just doing like a 1-to-1. So there was already a lot of people offloading right here. That's what we're seeing. It is what it is. This should be more like an S curve. Yeah, but I'm not particularly bullish on it. I don't think it's massively bolt divergent. I'm not really sure what you're looking at. Here to here, maybe a bit. I'm not seeing it. RSI looks like it's tracking up, but the price has been tracking up. So it already lost this trend. So that's gone. If it loses this 890, I think it's just going to go, you know. It's going to start dropping again. This to me is a big deal right here. That this came lower is very significant. I think ignoring that would be not wise. So it's generated like an early widening of the range, and then this is dropping likely down to that 4.5. You know, we'll see what happens. Maybe this doesn't end up making a lower low. That's what I'm saying. Like, there could be a lot of things that happen right here that wildly deviate and change the rest of this. If this like dipped down, for example, it's such a simple thing for me to sit here and say that I think it does this or this or this. But if this dips down, it changes like everything, like immediately. If this dropped and then recovered way up here, then all of this can be shifted upward, and you now have a higher low, and that could drastically change some things, you know. So I don't know, you know. It's just an idea of how it might travel. But if it changed somewhere in the middle in like March or whatever, sure, you know. Another one might be worth looking at would be this previous floor here and this 2016 bottom at 384. That might be another one to put on the chart just to have it. The dumps beneath 384, maybe get your attention again. Oops. Wrong ticker. Oh, wolf. I wish I could give you better news on this. So I was asked about Wolf. I've been talking about it quite a bit. I like some of the look of this chart. Looks really strong, and some of it maybe not as much. This probably was an overvalued company, and that's why it went into this really long-term distribution. I think there might have been an expectation that this was going to be bigger than it was or something. Hard to say. It's come back to retest a pretty important top from 1997, which is a really long time. Something obviously in the market had kind of baked in something for 2022 for this massive pull down. And yeah, I mean, from that point forward, it's been just down for like 2 years, 3 years, going on 3, I guess. So I'm a big fan of like that beak kind of drop. When it goes parabolic like that, the reaction is usually very, very, very strong once it breaks. The problem with the beak is it's always really hard to draw. And by beak, I'm usually talking about that narrowing range that looks a lot like a falling wedge, but it's defined more by a parabola than it is a line. And The other thing about the beak is it's really difficult, in my opinion, to find like an actual middle for it. So it ends up being like a cool idea that doesn't quite work very well technically. If I can get the target right, then I usually have a lot of success with that beak motion. And I think we've got it pretty close. We were talking about how like it probably already came and hit the creek that it needed to hit, and this could be a big reaction to the upside. Does it go all the way back to 20 something dollars before coming back down? Maybe. You know, there's a lot that could be said about it. I'm redrawing the chart, just kind of getting a fresh look at it. Yeah, you can see it here on the weekly chart. It's like trying. It's been doing this though, where it does an up thrust and then comes across and tests again and then drops, up thrust, comes across, tests again, drops. So we're in a similar situation where it's up thrusted, came down. It's actually testing, but it's testing it while underneath the moving average. So it's like, and it's clearly got like a massive amount of volume here for whatever it's worth. So yeah, if this were to break out, would we maybe see some pretty massive reaction? Probably. I wish there was an easier way to get this, but normally, like for the beaks, I just kind of look at the top, like the widest part. It's a lot like a triangle. So the reaction here may not be as like massive as you would expect. It's still a big move. That's probably a little too low, but that's like 134%, right? And it has to do not with anything else, just an auto reaction. So if you were looking at this from the point of view of like, maybe another way to do it is look at it at the point of view from like a trend, and then take that trend and move it outward. This usually gives you a pretty accurate estimation of where that might be, and it is right there. So the break here being, hey, if it goes, it could go all the way back up to near $11. And I think that's pretty reasonable for a reaction off the bottom. That does not mean it stops there. It's just a reaction. So like an auto reaction could be defining a range, could be starting like a bigger move, like a V-shaped recovery. It's just the beginning, all right? I think it's a safe bet for a number of reasons. A big part being that if you look backwards, this distance now does a pretty good job of matching the distance back to that floor. So that distance check that we're making, though it may seem a little bit arbitrary, can be tested. And you can see that that would make perfect sense, because if it goes from 5 all the way up to 10, that is a back test on this previous bottom, which, yeah, I mean, you can see it right there. It does make sense. So it generates a channel, generates an auto reaction back up, comes back and tests the previous floor, checks it. That's sort of all you need, you know. I'm thinking at this point that it's ready to go. I might even pick up some calls or something for it, because that divergence is pretty convincing to me. And it looks like it's narrowed enough that I'm not seeing how it could drop significantly again and maintain like a structure here. It's really close to breaking out. So one thing that would really help me is to see if this M has a similar target baked into it. That would be a big convincing factor. So I'm going to check this out. I'm going to check out the uptrend here. That looks really high. So that's a possibility. Let me see about like the 4 hour or something. It's going to mess up my chart, but whatever. Well, it's had like a big couple days, didn't it? Yeah, it's pretty close to breaking out too. Just here. Very, very close. This is like February though. It's weird. It looks like it's smaller than that, but it's not small. It's like a huge chart. And then there's another one. So that's one that's pretty good. There's another one out here. Much, much slower. Well, it kind of gives you a good time frame for this, because if it's not up there by this point, then it's not going to get there. You know, obviously at this point you've kind of missed that idea of the auto reaction. I would suggest to you this seems really likely that it goes pretty far, pretty fast right now, because it makes sense to me that this would maybe break out above and rally, perhaps even into that earnings, just like it did back here. And then I don't know from that point forward what to expect. Like most of the time, an auto reaction is met by maybe some secondary actions, but then it comes back down. And usually this is where it comes back to try to find an actual floor. And then if you're fortunate, you get like a phase B if it's going to take itself seriously. This is probably where we actually see it come to the edge. So this is a very long, I think this is a long-winded chart. Like, I'm not convinced it's going to, because this will probably back up to check that creek here, that leap that was made, and then gear up again and go up again, and then we'll see what happens. It makes sense that this might do that in this particular area and make a determination if it's going to go up or down. And then this ends up being potentially like a spring later, you know, something like that, if it's going to go back up. Why not just have a big V-shape recovery? Well, I'll say this much. If it does a V-shape, then it's going to obviously move pretty quick. It would probably break here and here at some point in the near future. And it would more than likely go to like $30, because I don't think, again, it would necessarily go all the way back up. But that $30 is a major hook. So roughly $30. Yeah. It may be more like 24. I think you mentioned 24 before as well. It's this level. I'm of the opinion that that could happen like way later though. Like that could be next year, kind of later, like a year from now. Because if there's a desire to trade here and then take it up and not come right back down, then it would make some sense to just kind of work through this. There, you know, dozens of ways to draw it out, obviously. So at the moment, and we keep coming back to Wolf, but at the moment, I think that I put 25, 28 on my screen, I think. At the moment, I think if it breaks here, we're probably in really good shape to see it pop to 1079. I want to say we did this on the other chart. I think we did a wedge type action. Yeah, Same thing. It's the same breakout level. So there's a lot of possible move to 1090. So maybe an $11 strike here would be good. But I don't know when. The shorter term, the more money you'll get, but if it's kind of like a, you just never know. Like this could come right back down into earnings before it takes off. Might try to find another bottom, you know, and then take off after. So it's like a tough one. I probably would put it out here in like March. This window. Maybe March or April. Mock. Maybe March. Be at 11. Well, let's take a look. Let's look at the options chain for it. No harm in looking. I'm going to grab a cup of coffee real quick too while my options chain thing is loading. So I'm going to go ahead and type it in and then I'll step away for just a moment. All right, I'm back. So what I'm going to do is look at, we can see weeklies, but I just want to see what March, so I got March 21st options and April 17th. So we'll look at both of those. I'm going to look for calls and I'm going to check out maybe 20 strikes or something. And I'm going to see if I can get the, I've got the delta, but where's the theta decay? Yeah, I at least want to see those two. The delta theta ratio is a pretty easy way to have a good option picked, as it lets you know at a glance, if you can do the math real quick in your head, it lets you know at a glance if you're gonna, how much you have to kind of outpace time. So right now it's at $7. I'm seeing strikes up to 12, which is about right. We want to see if it can go up to about 11, but maybe 1050 is a better option contract. There's a lot of open interest right now. I don't want to see those. Why does it show me that? Oh, it like reset my thing. That's why. I don't want to see those. March is way out there, but I guess you could do both. You could probably do some like short term for the end of January and then, or even like the first week of February and then do the March. So for February 7th, which is 22 days away, there's a decent amount of open interest, but not a lot of volume at that $10 strike. It's pretty much nothing at 10.5 and 11. The $8 strike, interestingly, has a high amount of volume and a high amount of open interest. So that's actually the largest one for February. The beginning of February is the $8 one. Delta's 46, which is pretty high, 46 cents. Implied volatility 165. That's not bad. There's a little hike there in implied volatility. They're 80-cent contracts. And then the theta is at 2 cents. So that's a pretty good ratio. And then March that's a different story, man. March has a huge amount of 12 fives. It has a lot of 8s. Those are 50 cent, which actually is better delta. Implied volatility is 135, so you're getting a lower implied volatility, obviously, because they're farther out. And the theta decay on those is about half. It's like 1 penny. So the $8 strike for March, probably pretty healthy. It's $1.27, so it's a bit expensive compared to 80 cent. Obviously, that's a 40, that's like 50% markup, right? So 50% more expensive than the previous month. Interestingly, there's a lot more open interest in the 12 fives and the 11s and the 10s. There's a ton of people going for like 15 out there kind of stuff. I don't know if I put 15 on that for March, but the volume is highest on the 17 fives, and which is bizarre, and the 14s. And those are the ones that are down today. So they're down in price today, which might be why there's more volume. I'm not a big fan of that delta on the 14s. It kind of drops off a cliff starting at 12.5. Goes from 25 cent to 19 down to 16 and then drops. So it's less than a penny though, which is nice. 28 cent, so rightfully so. I mean, the price is almost slashed in half on those contracts. As soon as you get above 12.5, the contract price just dumps. 14s are less expensive than 15s, and then 16s go way off a cliff again. So let's take a look. Hold on. So if we were going to go with a comparable contract that has a decent, I actually would probably go for, they're $1 a piece. Maybe the 9s. But I like to go a little bit above because usually you get a better deal. I mean, you can get whatever you want to get if you wanted to get in this. I'm just trying to like find a good value. And 12.5s are pretty cheap, 12.50s. It's a nice even number. It's 25 cent delta, 1 cent theta decay. It just depends on what you want, I guess. The 8s in March, pretty nice. It might be good to pair the 8s in the $8 strike for February 7th. I'm just looking at what I like, but you guys decide what you want. Because I like this play. I think it's a good one, but I'm also cautious about this, worried about this not going the right way right here. Kind of dumping back through. It's right on the edge, but it hasn't quite broken out. So it's got plenty of space on the daily to continue. There's no telling with an earnings right around the corner for hiking up before or what. But then March, maybe better to go a bit higher. Just for the similar price point. Man, I feel like the 9s are better, but you get more bang for your buck. And I think 9 is better than 10. The volatility is like the exact same. Volatility is highest on the 12.5s and the 14s. 14s are super cheap, but you'd have to buy more of them to make more because the delta is really low. So it's a trade-off. Let's see. How many would you have to buy? $30. You have to buy at least 2 of those. about the same exact thing, because like it's actually pretty proportional. So if I bought 2 contracts of 14 versus 1 at 10, it's cheaper and you get about the same exposure. And the volatility is actually higher for the 14s. So I actually think the 14s for March, weirdly enough, because it's a bizarre little, maybe the 14 strike for March, but you'd have to buy more, and it's really versus the kind of the same exact strike price, though it's not the same strike, would be the 10s is what I'm like looking at. So like the 14s you can get 2 for less than it costs to get 110. And if you get 2, technically the exposure is the same as the delta exposure is the same as the 10s. And there's a higher volatility on the 14s, which could be good, could be bad. Obviously, you're going to lose more if it dumps, but I'm thinking that the 14s are actually a good deal, weirdly enough. And that's March 21. That's all that's available. So that's a good one. Kind of straddles our price too, because we're talking about 14 here down to 8, and I think that's about where we think this range is. So you get a nice little straddle around the price targets that we anticipate. So then we need to decide what a stop loss would look like here. Put to call ratio is ridiculously bullish. Volume's at like 16 million. I don't know. 611 is your stop. I only trade shares. That's cool, man. It's up to you. Trade what you want to trade. Yeah, below this floor, I think you're right. 610. Mm. That February is going to be close. The February one is really going to push it. Okay. It looks good. Right now it's a bit of a risk-on trade, because I think the general idea of just, it just breaks out and runs doesn't really apply most places. This reaction is fine. On a small term, it's probably going to lose a little bit of steam when it hits this peak here. It's already at it. And that's right at the edge. So I do think there's a likely chance that this does not go over the creek like immediately. So you might even put like a 740 alert. And if it does break 740 and come over top, then this is potentially like a play. And if it does not, then we don't touch it until it comes back down, probably. I'm gonna be as disciplined as I can about it, because I think that this is one of those instances where it could even come up and slide low, but I really think that there's a really good buy-in here, probably, and I'm not sure that this is it right this second. I'm on a 2 hour. Let's go to like 1 hour. Let's see if it's overbought. That's a huge buy-in. It's overbought. It's not bad. It's just, I don't know. It is the place you might expect to see some turn down. So I'm curious. And this whole inauguration thing kind of throwing me off. I want to see it hit like 6.5. That'd be another place to put a alert. Would maybe be like 660s or something like that. Oof. I'm standing up. My knee's been doing like this weird thing. I don't know what it is. I'm gonna have to go see somebody about it. My knee's doing this weird thing with a, I don't know, it's like a phantom pain of, like a sharp pain. Feels like a pinched nerve or something, you know? Creates this like really sharp pain right on the inside of my knee, my left knee. It's painful. It's not a cramp. It's not a muscle cramp. It's like a harsh pain, like a shooting pain. Like someone's stabbing my knee from the inside out. I don't know what I need to do, stretch out or something. It's not good. Too much sitting, I think, this past week. Way too much sitting. Sounds like ACL if it's the inside. I did my MCL outside. It's not comfortable. Well, I hope I didn't do anything like that. I don't know. May need to get it checked out though, because it's not. It's like it started maybe a week ago. I remember I was standing up, and I wasn't even like putting any pressure on that knee. I was like leaning on my right side, and there was no pressure on that knee, and all of a sudden it just like flared up, and I was like, "Holy cow! Like, what was that?" And it just it happened twice this morning. My knee's like bent when it happens usually, so like slightly bent. So I'm not sure. It's not good. I do not like injury that I don't understand. A bone spur? Do you do karate for exercise? Yeah. I mean, a lot of knee problems in that line of work for sure, but I'll look it up. I'll see what's going on. Maybe. It's not constant though. It's not like a constant pain. It's not even there right now. I don't feel anything right now. It feels fine. It's just like this random. It flares up for like 5 to 10 seconds. And then goes away. So we'll see. I don't know. I need to see a physician anyways about other things, so. Other things? Why'd you say that? Like that? I don't know. I gotta get blood work done, that kind of stuff. I told my physician I'd do it this year, because I haven't done it in a little bit. I'm gonna check the old prostate stuff through the blood. So health problems, yay! I'm really like, I do not like health problems. Obviously, I told you guys about my brother, but I have another guy who I know. He's my friend, and he's been having a really hard year. And it's not gossip. You don't know him. It won't affect you guys, but man, he just had like the worst. I just don't even know. Like he's had the worst couple of years, like anybody I know, and his wife is like started cheating on him and wants a divorce, and it's just rough, dude. He's been having trouble with work, like getting good work, and then he goes to the doctor, and he's got like coronary heart disease, and they just found out like yesterday. And I was like, geez Louise. And they charged him $1,100 just to basically just so he could find that out, because he had to get the MRI and all that stuff. And I'm like, good Lord, he's going to have to get like a stent or something in his heart. But it's like, man, when it rains, it pours, dude. He does not have, he was joking about it. He's like, all right, I guess I'll go to my money tree and give you $1,100. You know, it's like, he's joking about it, but it's like, that's a lot. And he does not have, he's been trying to get this job as like a general contractor, and he's got it all lined up, but it's not like approved yet. So he's just like waiting for this. I mean, just come on, you know, give the guy a break. Rough time. You can count your blessings, man, if you got health. So a bit of a wonky knee isn't a big deal in the end, but I do have to make sure I check it out. It's like, man, it is not cheap to get injured in this country. It is not cheap to have any kind of serious problem. It's crazy. Uh-oh, he's getting to get political. No, I'm not. I'm just stating a fact. It doesn't matter if you're about privatized healthcare and you just want to like pay for everything out of pocket, or you want pick your own insurance or whatever. I don't give a crap. It's not about that. It's about the fact that it's expensive. It's all get out just to like stay alive. It's crazy, dude. This is one of the reasons I was trading. I've been trading like so hardcore too, is I really want to try to help my brother out financially, but I have to be in a position to do that. So if I'm not in a position to do that, I can't do anything, obviously. Yeah. One of the hardest things for me as a person is just not like seeing other people having those troubles and just not really being able to do anything about it. I just really struggle with that. Like I get mad at myself, you know, I'm like angry if I can't do anything about it. I'm not sure why. Like hero complex, I don't know. Just something. But I don't want to be people's heroes necessarily, but I want to be able to help if I can. I feel like I owe it to humanity to do right. I've done enough wrong, so time to do right. This is a kind of a boring day. Probably going to wrap it up soon. I'm looking at stuff like trying to determine if I want to really go back and talk about this or talk about that. Everything is exactly where it was like an hour and a half ago. I don't see any major changes. My guess is that this is one of those days where I'll probably turn it off, and then as soon as I turn it off, around noon, something good will happen, you know? So if you're trading the second half of the day, I guess just if you've taken notes or you're just thinking about it, my overall thought that kept coming up in the early part of the stream was the there seems to be a lack of follow through on a lot of this setup. Like it's followed through to a degree and then it's just kind of stopped. And I'm seeing this kind of universally that it's like we didn't quite hit the targets. Going into a Friday, I'm skeptical. That's why I didn't really trade. I decided not to re-enter IWM, for example, because I was like, Going into a Thursday, Friday, I'm kind of skeptical that this does anything huge, especially if we think Tuesday is going to be a big pop. It may just set up getting ready for Tuesday. So tomorrow might be a good day to consider a trade. I don't know if today is going to be a good day. It's a mixed bag. What we saw this morning was everything, almost universally, everything made a lower low this morning. Like it pulled back. So day over day, it looks like a 1 day pullback. Even if the stock's green, it did that this morning across the board, essentially. And there was a little gap up and then it dumped back down. I think that would be like an overall possible sign of a little bit of a weakness because you're backing up and still trying to like hold this advancement. And I have questions about that. Obviously, a retracement's not bad. So not every retracement is a sign of weakness. But what bothered me was that, like for IWM, for example, it went down and then it came back up and tried to like push over the top. It made a higher high, like after coming low. And I find that to be really odd. Like, this is very strange. So it's like it dumped backwards really quick. And then it's trying to get back up and it hasn't really committed to it. So I was mentioning that idea of like volume and it's not really looking like there's a huge amount of follow through. Volume's been pretty low on this ETF. It's almost like it just did it out of obligation. So like look at it now, you can see what I mean. It just looks like it's sort of trying but not succeeding. It actually looks like it hit that high first here. Yeah, right at the open and then drop low. Could it be a flag? Maybe, but I wouldn't trade it unless it came back above. And so the trend and really broke out here. So it's kind of like a pointless day to watch unless it comes back above 225, for example. This is essentially how I feel about everything right now. It just sort of looks like we're slumping. We may not be done with the bigger move, but for now, I think we need to kind of chill out and retest and reset maybe. So that's why this kind of reads more to me like a possible weakness as opposed to just like we're walking back down. Well, yeah, we are, and yet at the same time, it's kind of odd. These liquid tests seem to be fairly successful, right? So if IWM holds, what would happen is it would breach 225 and then take off from there. And I think that'd be a good place to consider an entry. Until then, you're just trying to guess where that bottom is. And on 15 minute here, it's turned down quite a bit. And I don't know, it could easily drop to being oversold, and I wouldn't think second thought about it. So hourly and up, I think got pretty close to the top, but didn't quite get there. So that might give you a little bit more of a case for like, maybe this does come down again and then it comes back up and breaks out and goes, but it's not like a significant pullback necessarily. It hasn't even lost on the moving average, hasn't even really lost that yet. So maybe it's going to test that again, drop low. That looks like a cat ear. Drop down and then pull back out again, go the other way. Whatever. I said the same yesterday. I just felt like it wasn't quite committed to it yet, and maybe that'll change this afternoon. I think the overall market, to me, it struck me as much the same. So like AMD did the same thing this morning. It goes up high, hits the mark, which is great, comes back down, but immediately it's like trying to push down through previous supports, like the one at 118.65. So it's like, well, what are you going to do? I think that the bears maybe to some degree, bearish folk maybe capitalizing on what is perceived as a bit of a weaker volume and trying to go ahead and drive it down. I get the feeling that the rest of today will probably help me a little bit with this because if I'm not sure about something, I don't really want to mess with it, and I'm not really sure right now. So I don't really want to mess with anything. And I feel the same about AMC. We were watching it this morning, and my only thought was, well, if it comes back above 350, we still have to deal with this 365 level. And again, it came low. Unlike IWM, this did break up and over. So if I were comparing the two, I would say that AMC looks stronger right now than the ETF, the Russell 2000 ETF. So that's a good thing. I would say it looks a little bit stronger. Same problem. Volume is kind of sunk, but as long as it holds above this like 357 level, I think there's a good chance, and I put this on here this morning, there's a good chance that this continues. I don't see why not. I don't see a high volume sell-off. Everything is just kind of like relaxed sideways action here. So this is pretty much what you want to see on a breakout. You got this really steep break, a retest, even though it did come low, it was all kind of in the same channel down. A retest on, I guess what you would call like the top previous, and then that was at like 344. So a big spike, and then it advances, it's flattening out. This is usually where you get a nice little pop if it can hold. So if it holds and breaks here, I think we'll see that advancement. And who knows, maybe that's coupled with everything else kind of going as well. Again, I'm expecting that I might be a little off today, and this afternoon could end up being like a bigger, more interesting time. Yeah, and I mean, look at the hourly. It's like only like halfway up. Definitely could see it piddle a little bit, but it doesn't look like it's ready to come down. It looks like it's just chilling out. So volume is my bigger concern, I suppose, but I'm happy to see that the volume was high in the bottom. It's not like peaking right now. If it were like low down here and peaking here, I'd be like distribution for sure. This looks more like a break, like a breather. So I think AMC is in a good place to start an advancement again. If it doesn't happen today or tomorrow, probably going to be Tuesday. We'll see a big pop. I don't see why not. Yeah, to me it just looks like the beginning of a halfway point maybe for a bigger reaction up to 4. If something changes, something changes. But for now, that's what I'm seeing. GME is a little different than the others. It doesn't even really have much of anything going on for it. Like the 4 hour didn't get oversold. It kind of just went flat. Weird, really, really weird price action here. I haven't checked. So let's check. I haven't checked the actual trends or creeks, so to speak, locally. I've only been looking at it like zoomed out and looking at 25. I still think that's a possibility here. This does read like a weakness. See that right there off of 27.5. That was this morning. Dip below it. So yeah, I still think GME looks weaker, so to speak. This is interesting because it's like flattening out, almost curving upward. So it looks divergent, doesn't it? It is on the 15-minute. So perhaps we'll see this react up before anything else. It doesn't mean it won't come back down. It could still come down, but we may see it react to the upside first. Maybe it backtests here at like 29. So if we get an afternoon pump, maybe watch $29 and see if it goes above 29 or if it gets stuck at 29 on GME. I wouldn't be surprised if it pumped up and then dropped again tomorrow and sort of finished this price action. And I'm betting that our creek probably would confirm this to us. Yes, it does. So the creek all but confirms that is likely, because there's a creek line that comes down that we haven't touched. It seems very likely this is going to react up in a more distributive fashion, hit that, and then come back down maybe Friday. And I don't know, man. If it can hit 20 something on Friday, I've got this all drawn out, long-winded, but you never know. This could react really strongly and be back up above, by Wednesday. There's no perfect formula for this, but I think I still think the target is 25. I've said that before. Somebody said max pain was 25, but I was about 25 before it was cool. I thought it was going to go to 25 for this reason, because it lost this creek, is going to come down. But yeah, I do agree with the probability that 25 is likely. And then if it's bullish, we would see it react back up pretty strongly. And I'm not convinced this is 100% right here, like that it takes this long. I've got it really long-winded, but in reality, if it just needs to get that hit, like I was saying, maybe Tuesday is like a huge reversal and you end up with a pretty decent rally back above here. That would be enough to convince me that it's pretty bullish, and then you just have to make a higher low. So at that point, we may just see it kind of come up and over and just start going. It's the same exact markings, it just happens earlier, and I don't think that's impossible. It seems even likely if it's bullish. Yeah, that breaks out and heads back up pretty violently would make sense to me. Yeah, Monday, you'd want to see it like set up here maybe by Friday, and that would be pretty strong potentially for a Monday run next week. That's a week of up, but it would be like accumulation, So similarly, you could say the same thing about AMC if you expect that. I said Monday, but I meant Monday the following week, not next Monday. You could see like next week as a longer term upside potential going into Friday the 24th. And that's about right, because if you look at where this is, unless it's like way down here, which I guess is possible, my guess is that Friday we're sitting here, ready to go, or here, ready to go. At like 4 or roughly 4, it's like 396, or like 415. Because in both cases, that week would give you time to buy in and play out whatever you need to do down here as a final move. Whether it's distributive or accumulative, it doesn't really matter, because then the following Monday, you could have a pop. If this is distributive, it pops to like 33 and then dies, or it just pops slightly above to like 31 and dies, right? Like there's a ton of places where if this is not going to run, there's a ton of places here where it could easily like drop backwards on a hook. So it's a really simple setup. Next week would be a really good buy-in setup, start pumping up, and then you do the same thing for AMC and just start that buy-in pumping up and then get ready. And then no matter what happens on Monday, the following week, the 27th, whether you're going to pop and then dump the other way, it's up, and then you either have that drop or not. So it makes sense. So then we look at other things. We might say there's a similar kind of pattern here of Tuesday pump, and then going into the following Friday, you can see why this looks like Monday right here as well. I'm not saying they're all going to run together, but it is a pretty similar setup. So Tuesday pump, Friday setup from the next Monday. That's a conservative outlook. It's not a hyper bullish or hyper bearish outlook. It's just a very conservative, like this is probably what we more likely see over the next week is a big up and then a down to retrace and get ready for whatever's next, bearish or bullish. I don't think we're going to get an answer until that Monday the 27th, really. From a conservative standpoint, I think it would take about that long. And the entry and exit trajectories support that. I mean, you could suggest that it runs Friday, but there's really not a lot here to suggest that it doesn't come out sideways that week. It could easily do that. So just not a huge window of error here is what I'm trying to say. It takes time to make this build out work. And the only situation where it doesn't do that is if it just goes straight up tomorrow, lands on top of 415 tomorrow, and then maybe Tuesday just takes off. That's kind of the only thing I could imagine. Gaps up and takes off or whatever. You know, that's about it. I don't know what else you could look at and suggest that happens any faster. So yeah, and NU is kind of my struggle bus trade right now. I think it's probably the one that's the weakest of the lot. It's just an issue of finding support, making sure it holds support. It made an advancement and then it backed up, and so it has to hold support over 11.15. If it holds 11.15, I'm not going to overthink it. I think if it holds 11.15 tomorrow and the next day, Tuesday, we probably see it rally to 12, but that's about as far as I would take it. Maybe 12.50 for now. And yeah, I think that's about it. We covered it all. So yeah, 4. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I'm saying that I think it comes up and rests on top of 4 Friday. I got it right here. I think that's probably right. It would finish, it would probably hit like 411 or 412 and then finish at 4. So this afternoon, like I said, it may be that we're kind of just taking a break on the 4-hour candle, and then this afternoon we see a bigger push. And then some continuation tomorrow before it comes down. Break it into 4-hour candles. It makes sense to me that might be what happens. But I don't think that, like I said, I think that's kind of like the main move out. If that does occur and we end up at 4, then we have broken out of that trend. So again, we've got possible evidences here that we're going to see another upthrust on Tuesday, and then we'll see. And we're in the range of will it or won't it go. And that to me is like the big what if. That's why I think it's going to be a week. I really don't think it's going to just take off. I'm happy to be wrong, I guess. You know, if it runs, it runs. Everybody's going to rejoice and be like thrilled that it's running. There's nothing wrong with running. I just have to look at the chart and see what I think. And what I think is that this is going to be the point at which it crosses down because it needs to shore up that support. We lost it. If you make the advancement here above 409 and you don't check it, it's not good for like later on. We need to hold that. And I'm still of the opinion that this could easily be a fake out, like it's just pumping into that motion and then it's going to continue what it was doing before. So like a temporary leg up. I'm still thinking that's a possibility. Very strong possibility. I'm not going to ignore it just because it's not popular, right? So I'm not convinced just yet that that's going to work out. So we'll see. So I think they're going to hold it there, keep us in suspense. Yeah, Wolf is pushing, but again, I'm not sure yet. I mean, it's overbought on a lot of time frames, so I feel like it's going up to check this EMA. It's finishing this gap fill. It may attempt to try to push above 740, which is where that creek is, kind of like right here. So we'll see. I'm happy to trade Wolf if I can get an entry, but I'm gonna try to be patient about it because I don't want to like jump the gun. We did not really discuss Doge today, but Doge is ready to go as well. If it moves above this high at like 40 cent, I think it's good to go. It's already checked the creeks, so at that point it would be out. Like genuinely, there would not be any reason if it can get up to 40 here and it can push over 40. There would be basically no reason to stop until the top, essentially. Until like 48.50 cents. So you should see a pretty sizable jump if it can make that advance here. I'm doubtful anybody's trading AMD with me, but I think it's the same deal. Like, I think Friday we might just kind of set up for a potential run on Tuesday. It wouldn't surprise me if on Friday it ended up at like 122, filled the gap, and then Tuesday popped, but then proceeded to drop afterwards. It's just my thoughts. The other alternative is it just comes down, in which case that trade I made is probably bust. You know what I mean? There's not much to do about it, except to just set a stop and wait. And it's moving kind of methodically. It hasn't really made that advancement yet. I don't think it's particularly bad. This does look a little more like a head and shoulder, which is unfortunate here on RSI. But again, as long as that holds, I'm not going to overthink it. I think it could still make that advancement. So probably is a head and shoulder because of this trend here and getting like hung up on it, which might be why my contracts have not done exceedingly well, because it's getting kind of stuck on this ledge. It's not the worst thing though, because at least I have something I can go off of. I haven't really looked at that. Yeah, maybe it holds above that tomorrow or Friday and we see that push. So far it's been fairly accurate, my assessment. I'm just genuinely surprised like I haven't gotten like the contracts have done nothing but kind of slump, which is a bummer. Bad contract, I guess. Picked the wrong one. That's what you get when you jump the gun. Let it be an object lesson for you guys. If you jump the gun and try to get in, you might be right about the move, but if you're playing options, it's really important to get the right contract, not get something that's going to theta decay to death. So all right. Well, I appreciate you guys hanging out with me today. And we'll talk to y'all later. Thanks, Reese. Same goes for you. Iron sharpens iron, right? It's good to hear different people's ideas and test them, you know? It's a longer way of learning, but it tends to stick with you, right? The experiences. And for those that, haven't seen in a little while, I hope you guys do well, and we'll see you again soon, hopefully. A few people that popped in I haven't seen in a while today, so it's good to see y'all. It's okay.